tried to get on open discussion, find it again, and couldn't find it. And I was searching for you.
It's so funny because it's the document I'm looking at is.
It's got a woman's name. It's not a chain.
Maybe I just have a PDF.
Yeah, Lillian's. Yeah, Lillian's. On Far Hills Avenue. Here,
I have some. Thank you.
Oh, shoot, Ryan, darn it.
hi.
Huh?
Yeah, I like their stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, because Josue just went out too, so go for it.
I'm looking. What the heck is it? Use draft because it's got to be in by Thursday.
Okay.
So that came second. Yeah. You have it? Is that all?
Yeah. Do you want it back?
I don't know
Yeah,
what's
because I
going on.
copied it for you guys.
Just minding my own business right this moment.
So
Trying to remember the things that I need to do that I have not thought of and trying to write them down while I think of them.
This will be in
Do
the
you have that
packet
happen?
next
Like all of a
time.
sudden you're like, oh, there's that.
Keelan's letter selectively pulled off of Facebook what was on there, and there's more to that thread, so I guess I'd like you to just mention that
For me, it's like
it's on the
balancing
table,
my life like
and made in the packet next time.
it's like there's the village.
married or work.
I'm not gonna say anything. If something's not in the packet, I'm not.
Well, I'm kind of glad to hear this happens too, because I always try to blame it on just being old. Too much.
Well, you have a copy of this anyway, then I'll just say something because,
Yeah, I
she
keep
pulled
thinking
out
I
what
need to like
she wanted people to see.
do less. Do some things less, but I'm not really coming up with what
Okay.
less things are.
That's fine. All right, so we are going to move on with our regular meeting of October 7th, 2019. We've already called the meeting to order. We just came out of an executive session, and we are now going to jump into announcements. And so I believe we've got a special guest that we're going to start with. And why don't we have you come to the podium and introduce yourself? All right, you might have to tip that microphone down just a bit.
My name is Devin Townsend.
Okay, yeah, we might need you to speak up just a little louder.
Maybe you could hold the mic closer to him.
Yeah, that's true. You can pull the mic out if you'd
No,
like.
it's not, the mic is not giving you sound.
Oh,
Only Devin.
Okay.
speak up.
We're with you.
All right, Devin.
My name is Devin Townsend, and I'm from Mills Lawn, and I'm in 6th grade.
All right.
So there's your slides.
Go back.
This presentation is about my 6th grade community service project proposal. The whole 6th grade has to do 5 hours of community service by the end of this school year. Community service means helping the community in a small or big way. What I would like to do is clean up the trash by Yellow Springs Creek as well as other areas behind the Bryant Center. Those are some of my boundaries that I would have. And that's some of the trash in the creek. And that's a little bit of glass that I would clean up that's behind the pottery. And that's a little bit more of it. What I would like to do, I would like to do this on Tuesday afternoons from 3:30 to 4. I would need a bag for trash and a cardboard box for any trash, and I would bring work gloves and wear boots or closed-toed shoes. That's a picture of boots that I would wear. I would need a designated person to check in and out with, and I would need permission to put the trash in a dumpster and to know where the appropriate dumpster would be. I will need somebody to sign my form for the community service for school. This will help the community because there would not be trash in natural areas or broken glass where kids might get cut.
All right.
Good job.
Thanks, Devin. All right, good job. And I think I can speak on behalf of council and the village to say that, all right, were you going to say something, Chief?
I was going to let Devin know the police department will provide him with the bags he needs and any assistance.
Okay, great. And yeah, I'll say on behalf of council and the village, Devin, that you have our permission to clean up the Yellow Springs Creek. We appreciate that. And are you going to do this by yourself?
Yeah.
Okay, wow. All right, well, if you need some help, we could probably figure that out too. And as far as signing your form, I think our village manager would be happy to do that. And yeah, we appreciate the idea and the effort, and it's great that you're contributing to your community. Thanks a lot. Okay.
Thank you, Devin.
Thanks.
All right. Nice job. All right, yes. All right, you made it through your first council meeting.
That's just the appetizer.
That's right, exactly. Okay, do we have any other announcements?
Rails to trail.
What's that?
Or, I mean,
Tobias Stinson here?
What's that?
Tobias
Green County, is Green
not
County?
here? Okay.
Oh, yeah, so that's about the Parks and
Levy.
Trails levy. Okay, well, I have a few announcements, and then I also have something I want to read. So one announcement I want to make is I was at the Outdoor Experience on Saturday, and I found out we are considered to not be a dog-friendly community in Yellow Springs. I was very surprised to hear that. And actually, we have something that I think we'll be adding to the agenda that might respond to that. But there are some opportunities that other communities have done around creating a sort of like, I guess, kind of structured path for dogs when people come into town. Dog parks are another way to handle that. And also our businesses can think about the level of dog friendliness they want to be. But it seemed like that's not the right way for others to think about Yellow Springs, so I want to explore that more. Also, I wanted to mention this Saturday is Street Fair. So one of our events that brings a lot of people and also support for our nonprofits and businesses. So in case you didn't know, that's going to be this Saturday. I also wanted to highlight, in case anybody was not sure, that Trick or Treat will be on Halloween Day, right? just like it has been.
Yes, yes.
And we'll talk more about that in our next meeting. And then I also wanted to highlight to the rest of council that Mary Ann and I, with the village team, went to see the Renergy facility. And, I think it would be good for us to put that on the agenda maybe for our next meeting. But this is a digester in Bath Township, and it's the way that we treat our waste, essentially. It's a local project. Without it, we would have trouble dispensing our waste, and we learned a lot of cool things about how they not only generate enough energy to power 2,500 homes, and it may be an opportunity for us to find another way to expand our renewable energy portfolio, but they also have some practices such as they inject, what the fertilizer that they create into the ground. So it's not a matter of just like spreading it on top of the ground and contributing to methane and whatnot. But my impression was that it's a very sustainable operation that really we benefit a lot from. So we'll talk more about that later, but I just wanted to point that out. And any other announcements before I read my statement? Okay. So I have a statement I'd like to read, and with council's approval, would like to forward it to certain organizations. As council president for the Village of Yellow Springs, I strongly condemn the bullying tactics and disinformation campaign currently being conducted by Dr. David Nybert against Antioch College. Dr. Nybert's misrepresentation of the sustainable practices at Antioch College is tantamount to harassment and intimidation, and he is also acting in contradiction to our village values. While I do appreciate the philosophy of not eating meat, this does not justify harassing an organization to the point that they are receiving death threats and students are feeling unsafe, which is what is now happening at Antioch College. Notably, Dr. Nybert's disinformation has led to national organizations supporting his campaign, which is adversely affecting Antioch College and taking up a significant amount of staff time. I strongly urge these supporters to discontinue facilitating the harassment of Antioch College and providing a platform for disseminating false information without doing their due diligence about Antioch College's farm-to-table practices. On October 10th, from noon to 2 p.m., Dr. Nybert plans to stage a protest on village property on President Street next to Antioch College's campus. And he may be showing a video of meat production at factory farms that in no way represents the sustainable practices that Antioch College employs with its sheep, not lambs. I strongly encourage villagers to avoid this area during that time and not feed Dr. Nybert's disinformation campaign. Unfortunately, the Village of Yellow Springs cannot shut down this bullying activity because this is considered protected speech, but in no way does the village support this harassment. Only by ignoring such hateful activity, similar to what residents of the city of Dayton did when the white supremacist rally several months ago, will such bullying end. And again, I'd like to ask for council's permission to forward this to the organizations that are supporting this campaign.
Do you have the names of those organizations?
Yeah, it's change.org, PETA,
Okay.
and
I
In
had
Defense of Animals.
already contacted change.org.
Yes.
And I'll just say also that the petition that he had on change.org implied that he taught at Antioch College. And it also implied that Antioch students were supporting his effort. So I sent that information to change.org.
Good.
And I've also contacted Wittenberg and Dr. Nybert and have not heard back from either. But
Right.
yes, I support.
Well, it's gotten to the point that it's really frustrating. And, again, this is activity that as a village we cannot stop, but we do not support, I believe.
Right. I'm definitely support you moving the letter forward.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, all right, we're going to move into the consent agenda, and we have 3 items, the minutes from our last regular meeting as well as our budget sessions. So I'd like to get a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So next up, we have a review of the agenda. Anything we'd like to add or modify? So I would recommend that we have a brief discussion under new business about Richard Lapides' letter about the dog park. Anything else?
Yes. I have an item for new business, a resolution. We have an opportunity to compete for a grant, and we would like to add a resolution where the council authorizes to pursue this grant opportunity.
Okay, and this is a grant for,
It's a federal fund program. It's being sponsored under the Miami Regional Planning Commission and their Transportation Improvement Program. So we're looking to execute a Day-in Street Active Transportation Project along Day-in Street. And I can get into the details during the resolution.
okay, so let's add that under legislation. Anything
That's
else?
Yeah, we got, okay.
Okay. So, Mary Ann, petitions and communications.
Yeah, we had a number of them. We had communication from Governor DeWine with his recommended responses to new gun legislation, which included mostly mental health initiatives, some issues of being able to restrict gun ownership. Nothing about war weapons, banning war weapons, however. There was also...
And that was in response to our letter and resolution to him? Okay.
There's also an article that you, Brian, I guess, put in with two state senators, one from Cincinnati and one from Columbus, with a bill to the Ohio legislator that would allow towns to implement sane gun laws, or whatever that is worth. Then there were 3 letters to council in regard to the proposed test for traffic redirection around Mills Lawn School that would involve South Walnut, Short Street, and Limestone Street. And the 3 letters, Joe Ayers, Luan Height, and Gila Pomerantz, and these were all basically in opposition to that plan with some suggestions, some alternative suggestions. Karen Wolford, well, there were 2 letters regarding a senior center request for some financial support from the village. One was from Macy Reynolds, who's the chair of the board, with the request for some financial support and some options for how the village might, for what purpose the village might give that support. And Karen Wolfert sent Senior Center financials to elaborate on that. Patty Bates sent more information about the food forest planting. That will be this Sunday, October 13th, and the food forest is the park that, well, it's not really a park. It's an area of land that the village owns facing on Xenia Avenue and sort of the side of it on the south side of Allen Street. So Patty, this is her legacy project from leaving the village, and she was able to get donations of food tree saplings, and so seeking volunteers. It's a joint project with the tree committee, the village, and pardon? Xenia Eagle Scout project. And it's at 10 a.m. Sunday, October 13th. Bring your shovels, your work gloves, and if you have any wheelbarrows, bring them too. Then there were 2 awards from AMP, 3 awards from AMP. Wow. Okay, American Municipal Power. One for the work that our crews did to run electric underground at the Whitehall Farm so that they didn't have to be messing with the catalpa trees. One for the similar underground on Orton Road, and what was the third one?
Safety award for 2019.
For you?
Work-related accident for.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Johnny. So 3 awards.
Safety first.
Yeah. Let's see. And then Macy Reynolds wrote a letter of support regarding the tree award. And was Richard's letter in the packet?
Yes.
Yeah, it was in the packet, it's not in mine, okay.
Yep.
Regarding a potential dog park near the water towers on Gant Park. So those are the communications.
All right. Yeah, we got quite a few.
Yep.
Okay, so let's move into our legislation. And first up, we have Resolution 2019-43. Judy, let's go ahead and read that in full, please.
All right, this is supporting passage of House Bill 229, whereas the Ohio House of Representatives is considering legislation to amend sections 411.2.01 and 411.2.02 of the Ohio Revised Code to prohibit discrimination in rental housing based on lawful source of income. And whereas lawful source of income includes benefits or subsidy programs, including housing assistance, housing vouchers, public assistance, emergency rental assistance, veterans benefits, Social Security, supplemental security income, and other retirement programs, and other programs administered by any federal, state, local, or nonprofit entity. And whereas Yellow Springs strives to be a welcoming community of opportunity for all persons, regardless of race, age, sexual orientation, gender identity, ethnicity, economic status, mental or physical ability, or religious affiliation. And whereas Council has regularly affirmed affordability as key to inclusivity. And whereas effective use of housing vouchers helps to reduce housing instability and homelessness, reduces poverty, helps low-wage workers make ends meet, and provides families access to neighborhoods with better opportunities. Now therefore, Council for the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio hereby resolves that. Section 1, we strongly support passage of House Bill 229 and urge our representatives to support the measure. Section 2, we ask citizens and our state representatives to advocate for House Bill 229. Section 3, the clerk will provide copies of this resolution to Representative Rick Perales and Representative Bill Dean.
Okay, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, Kevin.
So, I feel like this is my first child, it's my first resolution that I've written. And so, in short, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, effectively, there are general laws and rules around housing discrimination, but apparently it's not clear and not absolutely illegal in the state of Ohio for a landlord to turn down a potential renter when they present a housing voucher. We typically think of it as Section 8, but it is not illegal right now, completely illegal for a landlord to do that. So the House has taken up this measure to strengthen the existing law to make it explicitly illegal. Brian noticed that the current legislation is co-sponsored by all Democratic representatives, so he encouraged me to reach out to Representative Rick Perales, who's a Republican, and I happened to run into Representative Perales at the State of the Library meeting last week. So now he and I are buds. So I shared with him my thoughts and asked him to co-sponsor the bill. It's currently in committee. It's in the Labor and Commerce Committee, so he can't do anything with it right now. But once it's out of committee and back on the floor, he's considering co-sponsoring. And I will say that his office has been very responsive, by the way. I wrote and called them, and they got back with me right away. He seemed, again, interested, and based on our conversation, in supporting the bill. And Bill Dean, by the way, is the vice chair of the committee that it's in right now. So I think getting the resolution up to the folks in Columbus immediately would help, I think, put some more legs under it. So I appreciate council doing this and look forward to some positive movement behind this bill.
And that's good to hear. I saw Representative Perales a couple days ago, and he emphasized, like he always does, that he's here for Yellow Springs. So I'm going to push him as well. I also would recommend that we send this to Senator Hackett, because ultimately it's got to go to the Senate as well. All right, any questions or comments? Questions or comments from citizens? All right, if not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, great work, Kevin.
Thank you.
Next up, we've got Resolution 2019-44, approving membership for the Yellow Springs Community Development Corporation. Let's do that one in full as well.
All right. This is approving membership in the Yellow Springs Community Development Corporation, whereas Council for the Village of Yellow Springs firmly believes that economic development in an environment of collaboration is essential to the continued financial health and well-being of the village, and whereas Council recognizes the necessity for a collaborative body that can provide the insights and flexibility needed to advance, encourage, and promote the industrial, economic, commercial, and civic development of both the Village of Yellow Springs and Miami Township in Greene County, Ohio. And whereas Chapters 1702 and 1724 of the Ohio Revised Code allow for creation of such a charitable nonprofit corporation, and whereas Council for the Village of Yellow Springs must therefore agree to appoint 2 members of council to the board, now therefore be it resolved by Council for the Village of Yellow Springs that, Section 1, Council declares its approval for 2 members of council to serve on the board of the Yellow Springs Community Development Corporation.
Okay, can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
All right. Lisa?
Yes, I'm just so excited to have this coming forward. It has been a lot of work. We've been working on this for the better part of 2 years. And not only is it an accomplishment for the village government to further economic development, but I think more importantly, it represents a really significant collaboration between the township, the school board, our body, the community members. I mean, it's just, I'm really thrilled at what this represents. And we've talked a lot about how, given that we have scarce resources and we all need to really communicate with each other effectively. So I'm thrilled to have this resolution. Later in the agenda, we also have the Code of Regulations for review. Each of the entities that's a part of this work is taking the Code of Regulations to their stakeholders for approval. So this resolution is the first step, and then the approval of the Code of Regulations by each of the entities is a second step. And then once that's completed, we'll file to become a tax-exempt entity. And then once that is successful, then we will have to pass another piece of legislation identifying or designating the CIC as an economic development agent of the village. And then we can do more work. So I'm really glad to have this in the packet.
Yes. And I'll just add, because Lisa and I have been representing the village on the Community Development Corporation, which has been meeting for several months. Antioch College is here today, and Tom Manley has been part of those meetings, as have the Chamber and also the Community Foundation. It's very important, and this was something we listened to citizens bring to our attention when there was sort of the conflagration of the school levy, the township levy, and utility increases. And we realized it was very important for the elected bodies to be coordinating, as well as all the potential we have for developing our community and sustaining our community in the way that we want to. So I've been really happy about the participation. Lisa has been doing an amazing job of pushing this forward. And one of the things I want to emphasize is the designated piece of this is that 40% of the Community Development Corporation are elected officials, a lot of transparency. These will be publicly announced meetings, and we got a lot of opportunities in this village. It ties very nicely with the update of the comprehensive land use plan. I know several of you were at that kickoff meeting, and we're really excited about the things moving forward. But it was very important to us that, the community had that guarantee around transparency, and that's where we're going. So, any questions or comments from council or citizens? Okay. If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So then we've got our new resolution, which is 2019-45, and Judy, we can do that by title only.
All right, this is authorizing the submittal of applications for federal FAST Act funds through the Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission.
Okay. Can I get a motion, please?
I move.
Second.
All right. And by the way, FAST Act is Fixing America's Surface Transportation. This was the new transportation bill that was passed 4 years ago. It's getting ready to be reauthorized. And, on the federal level, every piece of legislation has to have a fancy acronym. So thus the FAST Act. All right, Josue, tell
All
us
right,
about this.
thank you, Brian. We have the opportunity to pursue this federal funding for a project that would allow us to create a sidewalk. This is a shared bike pathway along Dayton Street. This particular project that we're putting forward, or that we intend to put forward with your authorization, would address 4 items that have been identified in the active transportation plan. And that's the item L6, which is Dayton Street from East Enon to Elm Street. This is a shared use path reconstruction. S8, which is Stanford Street at Dayton Street. This is a traffic calming activity. S9, which is High Street at Dayton Street, also a traffic calming activity. And S10, which is Dayton Street at King Street. This is a street calming crossing treatment. I want to point out that these plan does not include the raised table talk at this point, because we've taken the recommendation from the fire department where there's a concern about large vehicles crossing over a raised tabletop. So their recommendation was to create a cutout that is the size of the wheel wells, so that emergency vehicles could cross the raised crosswalk without slowing down significantly. So that this project doesn't currently contemplate that for those specific items. In a nutshell, the project's looking to request, the project is estimated to cost $1,195,658, of which there's an expected local match of $331,000 that the local municipality needs to secure. And this is thinking of fiscal year 2025, so this funding doesn't need to be available until a few years out. How will we secure the $331,000? There's another grant opportunity that becomes available to us in a few years through another grant, OPWC, that we intend to pursue to cover the majority of this amount, if not the entire amount. So that's how we're thinking of financing these activities. I want to point out that if we didn't have the active transportation plan ready to go, we would not be in a position to have such a short turnaround time to compete for this grant opportunity. Would you like me to read the resolution before you?
So we just got it, it was sitting on our table, right?
Yes.
We didn't know about it beforehand.
Correct. We didn't have the opportunity to get it in the agenda. Previously, this is something that we were approached with a short time frame, and we put together estimates with Dan Hoyning from LJB, and they've made some initial estimates on this to put us in a position to
Could you go over
compete.
each of the areas that you're targeting?
So I'll
We
explain the
want
first one, because this is one we've talked about before, which is currently on Dayton Street, we have the side path and the sidewalk. And the side path is degraded and the sidewalk needs improvement. So that piece is that idea of combining those and creating a hike-bike trail.
Okay.
Nice and wide and usable.
From where to where again?
So that's from
East Enon.
Enon down to Stafford, right? And that's actually where the side path ends at Stafford. And that was one where we also wanted to try this kind of treatment because we thought it would also be a good way to deal with West South College, where we have that same problem.
Same problem.
Right. And I think there are other areas where this makes sense as well. So again, nicely asphalted, easy to maintain, plenty of space, and then it would be, able to get the kids up to the high school and middle school more safely. Not to mention a great amenity for our citizens in general. Now, the traffic calming, do you want to talk a little bit more about that, Josue?
Yes, S8. This is at Stanford, at Dane Street. S8 is, I'll read the description of the recommendation from the active transportation plan. It states, the parking lanes at this location make the street seem wide, which encourages faster speeds. Install curb extensions at all corners to visually narrow the street, showing drivers, shortening crossing distance, and improving visibility. Curb extensions can act as gateway treatment to help drivers understand that they are entering a downtown area where slower speeds and increased attention are necessary. That's S8.
Okay. And maybe I'll jump in there to say, we've also discussed these. They're commonly called bump outs. So the idea is that they shorten the amount of time to cross the street. And as that description describes, they visually indicate to drivers that you should not be speeding down Dayton Street into our village, slow down, and
we
that's,
put some, don't we have one on Xenia Avenue and one on Dayton Street? I mean, I remember there was talk about it and resist.
It's
So we don't
actually-
have any yet?
Yeah, it's
yet
something
at
that,
all?
Laura Curlis in the audience was always talking about bump outs.
Yeah.
And it's something that is proposed quite a bit in the active transportation plan. Corey and Xenia is a great example where, it takes forever to cross those streets. And when you are, differently abled, you're older, you're younger, it's not safe. And so, this is a treatment that communities everywhere use.
Yeah.
Very exciting that we may have the opportunity to start doing some of these other projects. Okay.
Yes. Should I read S9?
Yeah.
S9 is High Street at Dayton Street. The description of this recommendation is, the parking lanes at this location make the street seem wide, which encourages, it's the same
Same
description.
thing.
Same.
So it's still the bump out, the
The bump
curb
out.
extension?
Yeah, bump outs.
Okay.
The S10, which is Dayton Street at King Street, description is add signage, a crosswalk, and curb extensions at this location to alert drivers that people are crossing to access the park and Green Cat's flag stop.
So I'll add one more item, since this is what I do with Rails to Trails. So this is transportation alternative dollars. They are federal dollars that are designed specifically for active transportation projects. And as Josue mentioned, there typically is a match, and that can be 25 to 30%. This is a competitive process, but I think that given some of the priorities, and like Josue said, the fact that we actually have a plan that's been vetted by the state makes us very competitive. And this is exactly why originally the Active Transportation Committee went after support to have a plan, because it opens up a lot of doors, things we could not afford otherwise.
And your authorization here is to give us authority to submit a proposal. This is just one of the many steps that's ahead of us. So we have to compete, and then if we make it to a final round, we move forward. There are many steps between now and having to come up with the $331,000 needed for the project.
Okay,
Okay.
good, thanks.
Pretty cool. All right. Well, I appreciate you guys getting this into the packet. Thank you. And and this is, since I sit on Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission, I had mentioned that there was a potential to go after some dollars. So I'm glad you guys kept up with that. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? Questions or comments from citizens? Laura?
I have a question about the tabletop thing you said and having cutouts for emergency vehicles. How is that going to be ADA compliant? Thank you.
That's something that we need to explore. We had a meeting where one of the representatives from the fire department provided an opinion, comment on our approach to this. They were concerned about the speed at which an emergency vehicle could travel across that tabletop. So one of the suggestions was this cutout. We need to dig deeper and do more research how we meet the ADA compliance and the safety requirements for the vehicles to be able to meet their, the time required to their cost, for their service calls. So I don't have an answer for you, but we can get back to you on more specific details.
And I think to kind of further just emphasize what Josue said about, it is an opinion that the raised crosswalks won't work. They work in every other community, so I'm not convinced that is, a problem for us. But having said that, I think that, we're trying to listen to some of these other ideas and see if there are different solutions that might make sense.
Correct.
Yes, Megan.
Megan Bachman, Yellow Springs News. I just have two questions. One, does the fact that some of those corners were recently I don't know what the word is, reconstructed factor in? Because I don't know when these recommendations were related to that. At least the one at Stafford Street I know is brand new. And then the second question is, if the decision is made tonight to move forward on the grant proposal, does that lock in all these aspects of the project, or is it flexible as to how it develops?
I'll start and then, so I think you're talking about what we did to have all the curb cuts and ramps. Anything that we would do would still preserve that. So if a bump out occurs, we would still have those ADA ramps. So that would not be affected. And then in terms of how this works, when you get the grant, then that starts the clock ticking for the engineering. So similar to if we get the Clean Ohio grant for the Yellow Springs Clifton Connector, we have 15 months to finish that project. And so you don't start the engineering and work out all those details till after. So what we have in the plan is kind of pre-design work, conceptual, but then, yeah, it would still be vetted. And with any of these projects, like we've been talking about, there'd be a full, public discussion about what we're doing and getting feedback about what makes sense. Johnny?
I need to add one thing. To Megan's question, if we did not have the ADA handicap ramps already installed, we would not qualify for this grant. So because we have it installed, we qualify for this grant, and the reason why it's here tonight is it's due October 9th.
Oh,
Yeah.
So we just,
Yeah, that's why we're under the wire.
Yes.
And to Johnny's point, one of the things that NVRPC looks at in scoring is that you meet the expectations of a complete streets policy. We're one of the few communities in the region that has that. And so whether you have the policy or not, that's part of their checklist. So
Right.
you've got to be thinking about all ages, all abilities.
Correct. And our policy meets all the requirements, so it's not just having a policy, but checking the box, but there are elements within the policy that have to be addressed, and we address them. Megan, to your second question, does it lock in all the aspects of the conceptual plans? No, because we still have to go into this engineering design phase that would allow room for things to be modified.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? This is pretty exciting stuff for a small community like ours. All right, cool. So all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Great. All right, Lisa.
so I have two things. This is the second thing on the agenda that makes me very happy. Tonight, we have with us Dr. Sharon Sherlock, Jonathan Phillip, Andrew Carell, is that how you say it? Tammy Whalen, not with us, but who also was involved in our health assessment with Sylvia Ellison. And this team of folks over the past months have been engaging with a quite broad set of members from the community, hosting a number of listening sessions, and completing a health assessment. And so I would like to invite Dr. Sherlock to kick this off. There's a lot of materials in the packet. And we know that we have, in the interest of time, to focus primarily on recommendations. And then after this presentation, I'd like to just take a few minutes to talk about some next steps.
Great.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Thank
Thank you.
I want you to look at this picture. This was one I walk by quite frequently. It's the one with the swings that face each other.
Mhm.
And I think that really depicts the progress that I've seen over the last 3 years, where you face a problem, but you face it together. So that's a compliment. We've done this for several communities, and we have never experienced the outcomes that we have here. So thank you for having us. Why do we perform it in the first place? That's that next. And we take a closer look for a health needs assessment to find your strengths and your assets. We're not just looking for problems. We also want to know where your strengths lie. And one of those is when you have an issue or a problem, you have people and experts and research and everything going on to solve that problem. So I commend you on that. You see both sides, and that's very important. You have resources. You think you don't, but you have resources right here in town that can give you some great ideas on how to solve some of your biggest problems. So we might use evidence-based things, but never ever think that that's a solution within itself. You always have to look at the culture for which you came from. Okay. You just delete those. I'll go on, because it's for here too. Is that all right? Yeah. Okay, they can read my lips. This picture also, it depicts in town, I wish the little boy was here daring about picking up trash. If you've ever seen anyone pick up a bottle or plastic, whatever environment, things being invaded on your sidewalks, you'll see the next person walk by and say, "Thank you for doing that." Now, you don't see that in every community, and it's very much present here. How can you improve on that? Well, you have to do this collectively, and you have to do it outside of the government, and that's why we had these special groups together. You're busy getting problems pushed to you, where we were getting ideas. Police is busy with issues and problems again, and we were getting ideas. The same way with EMS, push back on sickness and illness, and so their focus is not always in, what can we do better? So it was a combination, very good experience. It's a collective impact, really. And I like this picture too, because we discovered, our students and I and Tammy, that there is a culture here that is founded on wellness. You know that from the Glen. But also, we don't want to forget that always to be your foundation for decision-making. If you've got a culture of wellness, you keep the culture of wellness, and it's present here. It just needs to have a voice and a collaborative group to just get the discussions made. And it's restorative, because I think in every group we sat down and there was some tension, who's going to pick on who, or what idea is going to be picked about, or whatever. But by the end, we got consensus and ideas, and that's what the progress is. One of the things that we see, the new buzzwords, is live, work, play, eat, and shop, and you can do all those things here. So you check all those boxes off for any quality of life measures, and that's important whenever you're doing grants or any other fundraising. So that's not easily captured in a small town. It's usually used in large towns, but we found resources for all of that here. So we built this community book that you saw, the Community Health Assessment, and it's along with all your other consultant books and additions that you have. I told Lisa that maybe we should get those all together and see collectively what you have, what's missing in those expertise that you've been looking at in the past few years, and that might help consolidate and give you a better direction. But we decided not only to do some references from best practices, but get a summary of recommendations from the people living on your streets. And and pair that with the data. So some of the narrative reports and recommendations are not meant to be research. They're not meant to be backed by any best practices. They're just ideas from your residents who live here and work here and raise their families. So the council really hears what's going wrong, but they need to hear what's really going right. And you're doing a lot of great things. Sylvia Ellison, you mentioned her. She's from the Wright State. She had a group of MPH students who went out on the street and gathered some surveys and came up with some ideas. And what happened is that we got Cedarville Nursing College to contact us and say, hey, we'll volunteer to do a pediatric children's and mother assessment for your village. And in addition, we're going to do it for Xenia and also Cedarville. And we're not in comparison or competition, but certainly in a data improvement mode, because Ohio still ranks very low on births and deaths of young children. So we need to figure out how we can help that women's health issue. So we didn't get out of the box without having hands up to volunteer. It was great. So that pediatric portion will be done by them, and they just started on it, and we're guiding them through that. So it is going to be research-based. Now I'm going to have my two students, Jonathan and Andrew, come up and talk about a couple of their recommendations that they thought would highlight our program, and then I'll come back and summarize. Jonathan, you want to start?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Jonathan. I'm one of the students who worked on this whole health assessment. It's been a few months in the making. Thank you all for having me here. So maybe you'll hit the next slide real quick. That's mine. We had a lot of group meetings. We interviewed stakeholders, community informants, really the people you pass on the streets every day, people that are part of the village community and have actual keys and interests in this community and for preserving it and increasing it through growth. A couple of the things that stood out in the meetings to me, I've listed them. These are just a couple of the sample recommendations. One of them I thought kind of stood out to me was really the housing, was the growth of the community. A lot of people wanted to see the community grow, become larger, not only in terms of its population, but in terms of how it can facilitate people and facilitate their needs and quality of life. So with that, we know Yellow Springs is a very small, landlocked community. So one of the recommendations was, for me, that stood out was having the village council, having people talk and get together with realtors that actually represent the village stakeholders, people who are selling the houses, who are, looking at real estate trends, and having them meet with you guys and deciding what would be a good or best practice for increasing village population, whether that be the affordable housing that's been talked about recently, or stuff such as commercial property that would help to drive down costs of pre-existing buildings. So that was my first one that really stood out to me as something that the community really kind of aspired for. The second one, though it is been controversial in the past, was, of course, the fluoridation of the Yellow Springs water supply. So I know that has been a point of controversy for some people in the past. That said, I still found that to kind of jump out at me, whether it is the majority of people want it or there are people who say, no, we don't want it fluoridated. I think that, it is recommended by many sources. The data keeps stacking up that fluoridation would be good for the water supply and for the oral health of the inhabitants that drink from it. So that said, one of the recommendations I kind of tuned in on was, the village council discussing it with stakeholders, with informants, and I'm not sure as nearly as much about the proceedings of local government as you guys are, but perhaps putting it to a vote from the public. I'm not sure how exactly that would work, but putting it up to a vote, because I think that a lot of people were interested in that and thought it would be a good idea, but I have heard that it has been controversial, and there are a few outspoken people in the community that do not want that. So I think it would benefit as well.
And there is a way to do that. So if that's what the community wants, it's called an initiative, so. Okay.
Perfect. So those were just a few of mine. Andrew, would you like to
Jonathan,
step on
before
up?
you go, you
Yes.
said you've gotten feedback on the fluoride. what's your sense of the feedback? Is it half and half or?
I would not say it's half and half. I have heard that mostly it is a few very outspoken members of the community that do not wish for the water supply to be fluoridated. I think the overwhelming amount of evidence points that water supply should be fluoridated to prevent tooth decay and as a protective measure in the water supply, but I would say I wouldn't say it's half and half
Yeah,
from
well,
what I got.
We did have fluoridation in the water, and actually, the water itself has about half the recommended fluoride
Okay.
in the water. But it did come to council, and council agreed to stop adding additional fluoride. And it's still mixed, I think, in the scientific community, the pros and the cons, so, but that's sort of a side.
Sure, yeah, like I said, it is controversial. It has been gone back and forth, but I looked at that and I was like, it seems like people are interested in that, so I figured I'd put it up on my slide.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Andrew.
Hi, everyone. My name's Andrew. I'm a Wright State student. I was a part of the statistics here, so a lot of eye strain and looking through U.S. Census Bureau websites that were a little bit hard at times, but that's okay. Some of the things from we have a bunch of stuff in our packet, but just some of the things that stuck out to me was maybe increasing promotion of programs that combat food insecurity. There was a pretty significant portion of students that were on free and reduced lunch, and we made a graph of this with schools in the area, and the Yellow Spring schools are about right in the middle. So it's a significant thing in this community that we found. Also, increased promotion of restaurants with dietary options. We kind of did a survey on Google Maps, looked at restaurants in the area and their online menus, and there was about 15% of menu items labeled vegan on menus, and in similar communities like Cedarville, there's like 3 or 4%, or no labels at all for vegan. So that was something that you guys do a good job of, so maybe you could promote that in restaurants. Also, in our focus groups, healthy aging programs were something that people really appreciated, and they thought that increased the health of the elderly community here. We also found that telehealth services might be a good option for getting quality care to people. So because of location issues with Miami Valley Hospital and things, that might be a good option. Another thing that came up is to generate maybe more parking options. Some people felt that they didn't want to walk around the community as much because of cars and things and maybe being a little bit crowded that way. So that was one of the suggestions. Maybe one person said a parking garage with maybe a garden on top or something, or I don't know what. But that was one suggestion. And then increase awareness that there are a lot of females and women living below the poverty line and employed below the poverty line relative to men. Quite a few in our graphs that we made that just stuck out to me as that's something that's significant in the community. So, yep, those are my ideas. Thanks.
All right. Great. Thanks, Andrew.
Just going to wrap up by saying it's been almost a year since we had the free clinic at the AME Church, and they'd like to grow it. It's not that there's a need as much as there is gaps in every insurance plan around, and people are just struggling on how to keep up their health when they have these sudden gaps and/or just gaps of services. So it's not only a resource center, a clinical, but it's also a resource center for information. So Tammy's done a wonderful job, and our doctors keep growing in numbers that want to help. So appreciate that. I'm here to answer any questions. I do want to do the model. Hold on. Well, I'll do that after the questions. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I think one of the most interesting things to me in that assessment was the idea of using the EMS fire station as a site for some kind of maybe emergency health services. Can you talk about that idea? And I don't know.
Tammy could lecture you for an hour because she's been doing this for several years. But this is the upcoming thing. We're running into it, and we did a traffic mileage timing thing. You cannot get anywhere for urgent care quickly here. And so people decide, I'll not go at all, or I'll avoid it, or I'll try to take something and delay, or just not get care when you need it. Your EMS are here, they're talented, they see this stuff. It doesn't have to be a transport when you have access to just screen and clean, as we call it, and not maybe transport. You just need connection to your doctor the next day. You need maybe a medical person to overview. At some of our senior centers, they have little injuries. I mean, we don't need EMS transport on a sprain, but you can go to your doctor, get an X-ray the next day. I mean, ice for pain. We've lost the reality of what you really can do outside of an EMS transport to hospitals, and we're raising our cost of care up so much, none of us are going to be able to afford our insurance. So we have to think creatively. I think the hospitals are intrigued on trying it. They're doing some discussions. You just need to raise your hand and say, I think we'll be one of those communities that could benefit from it.
So you're on the point that I have found the most intriguing in undertaking this work. There are other communities that are doing this. We would be early adopters, but certainly not breaking new ground.
Correct.
I mean, that's important to know, because we can only do a certain number of things that only we have ever done this, So it's nice that there are lessons learned, there's models, there's grant money. And I've been really appreciative of both Chief Carlson and Chief Alt and Florence, because, what we're talking about here, not unlike the CIC, is another collaboration opportunity, because the village government is only a small piece of the pie. We'd have to figure out what our role would be. The township, because of they have the EMS services, really is a pillar. And then this issue that I know we are concerned about because, it came up in housing, the amount of childhood hunger and poverty in our community is very, very concerning. And, that also ties into other stakeholders in the village who could be focusing on food insecurity across the lifespan. So not just, senior center is amazing here, but we know we have gaps. And because there's a nurse in the school, and I can't remember her name.
Tina Vuvanovich.
And- Yeah, I'm sorry, just not catching her, saying her name right. But we also would need to be collaborating with the school board, because we learned that the health and wellness data that the school nurse collects isn't reported to the school boards. They have had no visibility into some of these
But that's not uncommon.
Issues.
But it's like a light bulb to us.
Right.
It's like,
So, this is not something that this group can navigate alone. But I'm with you, Marianne, in terms of these particular focus areas of actually knowing the community and knowing what people need and getting those services without having people end up in an emergency room without need.
So I was really appreciative of the holistic approach. I like that, active transportation came up and actually patterns a lot of the things that we're going to talk about later in this meeting, housing and a variety of other things. And I think you're right that, hearing these different messages from different angles needs to come together. And where it can come together is our comprehensive land use plan and what we're working on right now. So, so this is very informative in my mind. One thing that I would like to see is some numbers around how many people you talk to, and I don't know if you guys did demographics with that or not, but I guess for us to accurately assess some of these things around like the fluoridation thing, I guess I'd like to understand how statistically significant it was. And I know you were saying a lot of this was more qualitative.
It is.
But, right.
The statistics we mostly got were from the American Community
Sure.
Survey 17,
Right.
2017.
And I get that, but what I want to point out is, as you guys did with the policing assessment, I want to do the same thing with this assessment and do a little bit more, like looking at what we can and can't do. And so it would be helpful just to know, like number-wise, because there were some comments around affordable senior housing as well, that I just want to make sure that those don't get, I guess, blown out of proportion, which can sometimes happen. Okay, other questions, comments?
I'll say something.
Sure. We probably need you to come up to the mic then.
No, I was gonna just comment on the whole qualitative versus quantitative thing. I think that's a good follow-up measure. Right now, on the whole cycle, if you look up here, what we have kind of taken through the steps is up to 4. We've looked at the community problems, the health issues that, from a qualitative perspective, are what are on a lot of stakeholders' mind. As far as like fluoridation and senior affordable living, again, we didn't talk to the 3,700 plus people that were in Yellow Springs, so it was key informant mostly in stakeholder interviews. So as far as quantitative, that could be a next step, because ultimately the meetings we had were with leaders from churches, people who worked at the Beloved Community Project, people associated with the 365 program. So it's not going to represent quantitative. It's like fluoridation stuff. From what I heard, the fluoridation thing, there were some outspoken members, but as far as if you took a census of the entire community, unfortunately, we can't get that data from like the Census Bureau because they don't take it on this level. But yes, if you wanted to talk, I know you wanted to get in about the step 5.
Yeah,
I
and
just
you don't
wanted
want to
say that.
drop any planning in the middle of it. I mean, what you're doing is just bringing out recommendations and ideas, and then you get the stats as if it's something that rises to the top that needs to be addressed. That's where I think this talking to the street level people can do for you. Because I think out of all of this, we had more suggestions and recommendations than we had complaints. And that's the other side, that's the other face side of your residents, so. But you can find best practices everywhere. Does it fit your community? That's where you're at.
All right.
Thank
We
you.
would like to continue in that planning process.
And you will continue. We had some open meetings, so I know, Brian, you came to some of the open meetings, but I've kind of been going it alone a little bit without a council member partner on this. So, and I mean, we're in an election season, so we're not even sure who's going to be sitting here at this on these chairs in a month from now. But perhaps then we can decide after everyone has a chance to digest this report and think a little bit about it. I do think that this is going to be an opportunity for collaboration with the stakeholders that I've already mentioned outside of the village government. I'd like to be involved with that. But maybe as we get a little further down the road, someone else will raise their hand and want to get involved in working on this with me.
Well, Lisa, I appreciate you taking the lead on this. I want to thank you guys. I want to also emphasize to the community that this work was done pro bono, so no tax dollars were spent, and we really appreciate it. I agree that there's some great ideas here and some things that we definitely want to pick up on. So thanks again.
Is it available on our website? Will it be? Can it be?
It will be, yes.
And also, I do think putting it into the comprehensive,
Yes.
linking it with the comprehensive plan.
Definitely, yeah. So we'll have Denise get that linked in. All right, so thanks again.
Thank you.
We are going to move into citizen concerns. This is the time on the agenda where you can speak to issues that are not on the agenda. So if you are here to talk about the active transportation temporary project, that will be coming soon. And I know we've got some folks from that want to talk about the Antioch Farm, and so I'll try to package these topics around some of those ideas. President Tom Manley, were you going to say anything?
I was.
Okay.
So Yeah, I just don't want to say the wrong thing. This was yesterday's speech.
Oh, okay.
So, sorry. What I want to begin and say is thank you, Brian, and all members of the council for your support of the college, and all members in the community. It means a great deal, actually, to have you support the college over the issue of the solar sheep, and in so many other ways. I wanted to point out that I'm joined here by our board chair, Maureen Lynch, and by Christine Reedy, our there you are. I didn't realize you were, no, there you are, but I was seeing Faith sitting in front of me, who must feel at this point, I mean, Christine is 50% of our communication team, actually probably a little more than that since we don't have even two full-time people doing that work, and she must feel at this point that she has a PhD in countering craziness. So we will carry back this message to the board and to the faculty, staff, and students at the college tomorrow, and I want you to know how much people will be heartened and appreciate what you've said tonight. Environmental sustainability is one of the core areas of practice at Antioch College. As a American Association for Sustainability in Higher Education Silver Star rated campus, we're known nationally. We're known nationally for our top performing food and dining and grounds maintenance practices. Our dining hall serves mostly organic food, grown on local farms, including our own working farm on campus. Vegan and vegetarian options are an important part of every meal served, along with ethically sourced meat from our farm and other local farms, because the majority of our students are omnivores. However, during their course at Antioch, their courses at Antioch, they actually learn to appreciate and be grateful for all of the food that they eat and understand how that food is produced and how it can be produced more healthily in the world. Every meal prepared and served at Antioch College is an education, and our farm is a living laboratory for seeking out ways to sustain our community in harmony with the land. If more colleges, universities, and schools, food service organizations, and the hospitality industry in Ohio and across the world adopted similar approaches, the environmental health consequences could only be beneficial. One of Antioch College's fundamental values is shared governance. And as you know, we take that very seriously. As we were working on the recent issues related to the sheep and the protests and the petitions, and this idea that there would be videos being shown and people at the doorstep of the college, we were debating what our message needed to be. And in the process, the one suggestion was our campus, our choice, which seems really spot on for a little bit. And then we realized that that actually repeats the very mistake that we're repeating over and over and over again on this planet, that if we don't see, as Thomas Berry said, that the destiny of humans cannot be separated from the destiny of the earth, we're doomed. This is why, as a hub for humans learning, as a hub for human learning, we made ourselves a laboratory for the practice of environmental sustainability. And laboratories make mistakes, right? It's about experimentation. It's about trying things. We are committed to that practice. We are committed to finding these different and better ways. Change the story and change your perception. Change your perception and change the world. Those are the words of Jean Houston, the writer and humanist. This is what we must do to mobilize ourselves and our fellow world citizens to act for the planet we share, which is, in fact, an act for justice. If we turn our back on open, honest dialogue and deliberation about finding better ways forward that flow from our creativity, curiosity, and hope, we really will be lost. Faith's grandfather, Arthur, stood for a powerful approach to community building, set a pragmatic course, guided always by transcendental ideals. Transcendent, what I'm trying to say, transcendental ideals. I'll stick with that. So we thank you for this support. Our slogan is not going to be our campus, our choice. It's going to be support sustainable agriculture, support the Antioch Farm, support Antioch College, and underneath it'll say support Yellow Springs, Ohio.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate that. Faith Morgan, I know you were here to speak on this as well.
You know, I've been out on the Antioch farm with Kat and out in the solar field with the sheep, and I was struck by how they are so differently treated than farm animals that are raised in feedlots, just to make a very strong differentiation. My husband stopped eating meat after he read John Robbins' book. I think it's a Diet for a Small Planet or something like that. I don't remember the name exactly. He was so shocked with the way animals were being raised in feedlots, and it goes beyond that. And that's not what Antioch's doing. I think Tom Manley said it really well. The animals are doing what animals ought to do. They're grazing on grass, and it means that to some extent they don't have to mow as much. So it's part of a experimenting in a sustainable way, and it's treating the animals the way animals ought to be. Grass-fed, out in the sunshine, and I'm just I was very disheartened to have this sort of bullying, calling them lambs when they're sheep, just trying to sort of pull on heartstrings of people that don't really know what's going on. I mean, it's just it was very misguided, and I really, Antioch is an important part of Yellow Springs, and I think you said it very well, Tom, at the end, that it's all connected, and I think that I've been very heartened with how the college is using the farm to help teach the students, and I applaud it.
Thanks, Faith. Okay. Any other citizen concerns? Mitzi?
Yes, I'm Mitzi Miller, and I just want to thank council for addressing and looking at changes in some of our zoning codes. I really appreciate it. As time changes, we all need to be progressive and look at changes. Also looking at some of the police ordinances and the direction we're going in that direction. I really appreciate that too. And working together. I would like council in the next month, as they move forward, looking at working with Home Inc. and looking at their 54-unit building, that they really question and try to come up with a solution for guest parking, employment parking, specialists, OT, PT, speech therapists coming in, and that there is a need for that, and I feel it's not responsible not to put that in a plan. And I'm asking that you work with them in finding ways that that parking can be developed and should be developed. If it was any other kind of organization or someone who wanted to look at zoning or building, you would be addressing parking. They're addressing parking with their residents, but parking needs to be addressed in all directions, in all areas. I took a little bit of time and looked into another residential facility in Springfield that is now, 2 years ago, had to address additional parking with their residential parking. And what they found was when older individuals were to come in, this is 70 through 90, they came in with vehicles, at least one vehicle. Now, I don't know what the population will be there, or the average age, but it seems to me that parking's going to be an issue, and I think you should address it now. Thank you.
Thanks, Mitzi. Any other comments from citizens? Megan, and then Richard.
This might fit under the conversation about the policing, but my question is about, with Street Fair upcoming, I know there's been some talk about emergency management planning. I wonder if there's anything that you wanted to share with the community about additional steps that are being taken this Street Fair.
Okay.
Yes, I can address that, and also have Police Chief Brian Carlson here that can address that. We've done some scenario planning, and we've requested additional resources to ensure the safety of all event participants. We have some outside resources coming in to assist with that. We also have some paid resources that the festival organizers will be paying to cover the additional security measures that we're taking. Police Chief, would you like to jump in?
Absolutely. I just want to mention, thanks to the Chamber, they are footing the bill for, we'll have 6 additional uniformed Ohio State troopers helping us throughout the day. They have also provided funds. We'll be renting metal pedestrian barricades. And I just want to announce to everyone, the curve at Xenia Avenue on the corner of BP and Subway will no longer be usable as a crossing area. We're going to divert pedestrians down to the bike path at one crossing point over 68. So we're real excited about that. We'll be planning on this for each street fair. But again, a big thanks to Karen and Alex for really backing us in this effort.
Thanks, Chief. Thanks, Josue. Richard Lapidus.
I'm Richard Lapidus, and I did send a letter to you about a much less complex issue, which is the dog park.
Maybe.
Those
I'm not
are-
here, Richard. You hope.
Deceptively simple.
No, so now, is that what you're speaking to now?
Yeah, I don't have to.
We put it under new business,
Okay.
so if you
I'll
don't
speak.
mind. Okay, all right. Great, and we'll have you up. Kate Hamilton.
Hi, I was wondering if you were going to discuss Ellis Park at all?
I was going to ask that Josue speak during the manager's report, but if you want to bring it up now, you can do that.
I mean, I just wanted to know what the plan was for it. I know there's been some indelicate trimming of trees.
I had planned on addressing it at the manager's report,
can-
but I
that's
could address
fine.
it now.
It's up to you guys.
Judy, do you have, can you bring up that presentation? Okay, we received a letter and several comments regarding the tree trimming that took place at Ellis Park, particularly with one tree, the Dawn Redwood. When we, can you make that full screen? I don't know if you see the full effect of it. Okay. So the letter and the commentary that we received is that we carelessly trimmed the tree and other bushes and plants at Ellis Park unnecessarily. We wanted to specifically address the issue with this tree that's up on the screen. This is the Dawn Redwood. There's some wood decay and rotting that's taking place on the tree, and that needed to be addressed to extend the life of the tree and preserve that tree. So these are some of the pictures that we took today. The left-hand picture is the tree that's been, or similar to the picture that's been shared on social media, that we hacked the tree and needlessly hacked the branches, but that's not the case. The closer up pictures of the close-up, you see the wood decay happening on the branches. So all those branches that were trimmed showed signs of wood decay and wood rot. Again, these pictures, you see the center of those cuts there demonstrate wood rot. So this is the effort, this is the issue that we're looking to address in the tree. So that's with that particular tree. Our team did what they were asked to do, which is to take care of the trimming of this tree. It's something that the tree committee supports. They haven't had the time or the resources to do a program tree trimming, and we have limited resources to take care of all these trees in a timely manner, but we dedicated time now to take care of all the challenges that we're facing at Ellis Park, and that includes this tree. So that's with the concern with this particular tree. So we did our due diligence to cut back enough to try to take care of all the wood decay. You can see from some of the pictures that might not be enough to resolve the issue on that tree, that we may need to go deeper, but that's as far as we can go on these branches. So we're doing our best to preserve the tree and extend the life of the tree.
Josue, did we consult the tree committee about this?
We did not consult the tree prior to the trimming, but we reached out to them with, given the significant commentary that we received. Johnny, do you had a couple conversations? Do you want to jump in?
I did. So we have done this in several locations in the village, and I reached out to Macy this morning. Her and Chris went out there and met with the guys out there that are working on it, and they agree that nothing's harmed to this tree, that we actually probably did it more good than anything by getting this lower limbs that are dying taken off so it can flourish. I will say that what you see now, we cut back so much, and I did have Derek Willis with Arbor Care come in and make the final cuts so we wouldn't kill the tree. I know we're not arborists, so I called him in as a professional to make the final cuts, and he come out this weekend and made the final cuts to make sure that the tree was going to remain
So
healthy.
are you saying that the primary reason for that tree?
The lower limbs, if you go back to the first pictures, Judy, the limbs going out to the right had a bunch of dead in them. And that shows that there's dying coming in. Matter of fact, while Josue and I was out there today, we actually noticed 2 more. And if we could zoom in on the other ones, we didn't cut all the lower limbs. There's still 3 or 4 that are there that we did not take out. And actually, one of them we noticed today that is dead and we still need to take off.
I had someone contact me with a complaint about it. So I went out there on Saturday morning. I saw that. I was shocked too. And then I also walked around a bit and I saw a cedar tree that looked like it had been sort of slashed on the side of it, sort of close to the spillway.
I will have to go out there and look.
It looked like there'd been a lot of work done on the ground.
We are working on the ground and
And,
trying to get some stuff cleaned up.
It was, I don't know, a few feet high, it was not a cut, it was sort of like a slash on the side of the tree.
I'll have to go look at that. I'm not aware of that one. But what we're trying to do is trying to clean it up some, try to be able to maintain it. There's still, this is just the first week of what we planned on doing out there. And we've talked about making that park a park that we can go out and enjoy and do some other things with.
So I'm gonna, thank you for explaining, and I'm gonna suggest that this would be this kind of thing where, I mean, as has been said, our people love trees. So if we know we're gonna do something like this, it's gonna be so visually impactful, and that is such a beautiful tree, it would be good to let people know ahead of time. Maybe even put a sign up saying, hey, let everyone know there's gonna be some tree trimming, and might look a little odd, but it needs to be done or something. So then I know we're trying to get out in front of things, so we don't have furores over the weekend, which is when they tend to happen.
Right, and we, with this tree, that some of it, our team it was obvious, we went out there and we saw 2 additional branches that had dead, and we're gonna call Tanner and say he missed them. But yes, we can be a little more proactive about some of these, but we are being proactive about taking care of the park. There's been additional amenities added to the
Yes.
park. There's a new picnic area. There's electricity now there, so
Yes,
folks can
that's
come with
true.
their electric cookers and, heat up food or cook food. So we're certainly trying to make the park much more friendlier and accessible to people.
So then let's also get this explanation on Facebook. And when we can, give advance notice. I agree. That's important. Any other comments about things not on the agenda? Laura Curlis.
If I could comment on that, it's something I've had a lot of experience with in the past. I would like to suggest that we have Johnny become a certified arborist or somebody on staff. It's very typical for cities to have somebody on staff be certified arborist. And it's not you put up notice, hey, we're going to do this. It's somebody who's trained on this staff, looks closely and says what needs to happen. This looks to my eye, typically this is what street staff do, is they think that trimming it, first of all, I hate the word trim, let's use the word prune. They think it's like a haircut. You pull up the kid's hair, you cut it off straight. That's what they think it is. And that just hurts the tree. As a matter of fact, those limbs will eventually die, like I've seen done under a number of our electric lines. I think those jobs aren't really the best either. You need to be selective about which branches to take and take them off back. You basically have to take the whole branch off. If you top it, it's going to die anyway. This job looks to me like we need it to be easier to mow around it. And that happens a lot with evergreens in particular. Make it look, or make all trees look like we want them to look, either like kind of this triangle shape or like a lollipop. That's what you get a lot of streets people doing, and I've seen it over and over and over again. So hopefully we can move on to some best practices with pruning and have somebody from the tree committee consulted first or an arborist, be selective. When I look at those limbs, there's some rot, but I'm not sure they needed to be. There's a lot of healthy tree there on those limbs. That's just to my eye, and I've pruned maybe hundreds of trees myself. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks, Laura.
Can I add something?
Sure, Mitzi.
Why can't somebody from Johnny's staff be sent to some kind of training and get certified? Why can't we do that as a city? Just send somebody to some kind of training and his staff, and then have that staff member work closely with our tree committee and also make people aware of what's going on, so people aren't aggressive and, are working against the city, I guess, I would say. Maybe there's alternatives to look at.
Yeah, I think, and that sounded like Laura's recommendation as well. I think that's something we'll look at.
Yes.
But it makes sense to me. All right. Any other citizen concerns? Okay, thanks, everyone. We're going to move into old business, and the first thing we're going to talk about is where we're at with the police department assessment. Lisa, are you starting, or Mary Ann?
How about if I start?
Go ahead.
Okay. I think, was it in 2018 when Lisa and I thought that it would be appropriate to put money into the budget to do some kind of assessment of our police department, just to help us ensure that we could be planning to have the best department that we could have. And then in 2019, forgetting when, I guess spring, incidents happened that just seemed to get trouble within the department and within the community. And I know, speaking for myself, I felt like we have to have someone who has some expertise come in and help us look at this police community situation, because we didn't know how to work with it. And so both Lisa and I set out to look for some entity that could do this, and we made a number of calls, and we ended up with Bob Wasserman and Bob Haas to come in. I think, for myself anyway, it was somewhat of a sense of desperation. And looking back on it, as, what is it called, the armchair quarterback or something, I'm sure that there were things we could have done to have vetted the people that we had come a little more. But at the same time, we did get good recommendations for these people, even though most of their work, of course, was done with bigger departments, because probably it's mostly bigger departments that use consultants that come in. At any rate, we had an assessment done, and what was supposed to have taken 10 weeks took 5 months. And we, during the assessment process itself, there were some things that started to concern us about some of the ways the interviews were handled, and then the wait was quite concerning. And so when we finally got a draft in the middle of August, I guess it was, which was quite rough, we maybe in hindsight made the mistake of making that available just because that was all we had, and at the time, who knew how long it was going to take to get a final copy? Well, as it turned out, the final copy did come not too far after that. But I think weighing all things, that the end result is that we have gone through a flawed process that I'm hopeful will give some positive results. I think there are things in the assessment that can be very helpful, and some of the things that are directly related to police policy are beyond my knowledge, and I'm hopeful, and I gather from some of the feedback from reading the comments from the officers and the chief that there are some things. And at the same time, the report does seem pretty general and not as specific as we would have wanted to give, for example, examples of how things could be done in a small department, just mostly sort of general comments. So from my point of view, it was a very mixed bag of what the result of it, and to the degree that I bear some of the responsibility for it, I will take that responsibility. I do believe that that the end result, as I said, will be useful. I think that it sometimes maybe just having some intervention, even if it's not the greatest intervention, can sort of make a shift. So I believe that from what I've read of staff, from what Jose is saying and the discussion that we're having, that we are going to find a way to take what's come from this report as well as what we already have been doing. And really, truly, during those 5 months when we were waiting for the report, a lot of the things have been happening. So I will turn it over to Lisa, who's much more able to speak.
I don't know. I mean, it's interesting
Professionally.
to hear you reflect on the beginning process because, one of the things we were concerned about when we were looking for someone to complete the assessment with a very limited amount of funds was also finding someone who would have some understanding of our community. And so in that regard, Mr. Wasserman, who had a deep history in Yellow Springs, in many ways seemed like the perfect person. But I think perhaps we didn't intersect with him at the best point in his career. And as a result, he wasn't able to fulfill some of the timelines. And I think my biggest concern all along was a lack of specificity about the consulting protocols and the phases of the process and who he was speaking with. I mean, he was following what they call a starburst, method. You talk to some people, they tell you to talk to some people, you talk to those people, you talk to those people. And I think it was the right thing for us to do to not mandate who they speak with, because our selection of a limited number of people could skew their findings. However, in hindsight, what we discovered is that they did not interview very, very significant individuals who should have been interviewed. And as a result, mostly like every member of your team, Chief Carlson. So I think that was a significant oversight. But I do agree that that there's value. I think that our biggest challenge is that amount of time that it took for them to produce their deliverables. By that time, some significant changes had already occurred. Do I think that we've done all that we can do as a community to bring our guidelines for policing to life? I do not. Do I think that we've made improvements in our police-community interactions over the past 2 years? I think we have. But we have to keep going and not give up. And to that end, Marianne and I spent a fair amount of time parsing the analysis. Hopefully things will come out. I want to thank Chief Carlson, you and your team for their very forthright analyses as well. I hope that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And as I think I said at the last meeting, as a nurse, I know that sometimes when you're getting test results back or assessment results, it's not always easy. You don't always want to see some of those things. So maybe it's not easy to take in anything that could be construed as a critique. But hopefully we can find some benchmarks and find what works best for our community and keep moving forward.
So I want to thank you two for doing such a line-by-line detailed examination. And I really think that should be a model moving forward anytime we use a consultant to really evaluate that. And it was very well thought out. It helped me understand a lot more about, I think what we can work with. Chief and our police team, I want to thank you for your authentic feedback. That poster up there, Corkle, the second one is most important to me, is that we as a team, as a village, are open and transparent. And that's what I think has really been reflected in this process. No defensiveness, no covering our butts, right? Here are some things that we want to be really frank about and improve in the future. So from that, I think we can work with some things, and I think it segues nicely into what Kanetta's going to talk about in a few minutes about how we get some citizen involvement as well. So are there any other comments from council? Any comments from citizens? Megan?
Just a question. I know there was said you budgeted 30,000, but there was some expenses. Do you have have you received a final bill for it, and what was that?
We received an invoice recently this past week, so once we've run that number once we process that invoice, I'll provide you with a total.
Any other questions or comments?
Brian,
Councilor?
yes,
Yeah.
I would like to add, I thank you, Lisa, Marianne, for your feedback on this, and also for your willingness to be open in this process. I know I asked our team to be honest, to be open, because that's the only way we'll move on to the next phase of this, which is that collaborative phase of finding a solution that works for us all. I do want to point out that while we've received mixed reviews on the method and the content of the police assessment, there are these 4 overarching work areas that have been identified by all of us, including the police department, that there's room for improvement on, and things that the team already wanted to work on. They just needed a support and a process to be able to move forward on these things. And that is the community engagement, the transparency, the team building and organizational development, and the policies and procedures. I know when I joined the team, one of my first tasks by council is where are we with emergency management planning and policies and procedures. And I was relieved that Police Chief Brian Carlson was already working on these things. He was already had a list of items that he wanted to tackle and just needed the support in the room to focus to be able to work on these things. And we've been able to do that together. And I think that you've seen the progress with all the updates of the work that we've been done. So I think I welcome the opportunity and your support for us to continue that work. And now with the new proposal that we'll be hearing, I look forward to that process as well.
Okay, thanks, Josue. I'm going to then shift over to Kanetta to talk about what we're thinking with the Justice System Commission approach.
Yeah, so I thought about it a bit, especially considering how so few people signed up to be a part of the Justice System Commission. And I really had to think about why that was. And one of the biggest things I thought was, well, I don't think that people are suddenly not interested in justice, that people are apathetic or anything like that. And what I really had to dig into is what are some reasons why, if I were not on council, I wouldn't sign up for this? Why would I not sign up? What is the barrier? And I think, frankly, a big barrier is just that so many people who are participants in things like this are fatigued. There's something called activism fatigue and social justice fatigue, and I think that a lot of people are fatigued. They are not prepared to commit several years to a commission. I don't think that that's a reason to say, well, we're just going to shelve this for a while and wait until people have their energy back. I think that what we need to do is really shift and meet people where they are. And what Lisa mentioned before was that perhaps people are ready to work in shorter bursts and have a shorter timeline to accomplish maybe 1 or 2 tasks and be able to say, this is all I can commit to, and I'm willing to put in that time and shift. So what I think is that it would be really important to kind of start with a village manager-led group. And another reason why I think that that would be an important thing is in talking to people, there's a disconnect between staff and sometimes what the task force or commissions do. So with that disconnect, you can have a commission work really hard on something for a long period of time and they bring it to staff and it's either something that there is no capacity to do that work or it's something that legally cannot be done. So what I think is important is to have that staff input on the front end so that the work that is done can be implemented and it's a steady type growth. So what I'm hoping is that we can get started with a group of people who can commit to something perhaps a little bit shorter term until, and I think that the fatigue isn't just about the justice system in Yellow Springs. I think it's a much larger thing that is kind of weighing on people. So perhaps we can get started on something small and let it keep growing into the Justice System Commission. That's my thought process on that.
Great. And, I just want to add, because, I brought this forward at the last meeting, that I think it's very important that we don't wait until next year and that we do have citizen involvement. We've talked about limits on capacity from council, but this is an opportunity to do some of the work that Lisa and Mary Ann referred to, and I saw that you guys also referred to this advisory committee in your analysis. One of the reasons that we selected Josue to be our village manager was we recognized that he has the skill set to work with our department, and I think things have been going incredibly well. And again, I just want to make sure that we have that citizen piece in the mix also. So I believe if we're sort of on the same page with this, that we will move forward soon, because like you said, there are 4 areas that we want to get going and are already in process. I'll also
I
mention.
think it would be good to reiterate those 4 areas.
Okay.
Which I think Josue,
Yes, there are community engagement, and that's several methods of engaging with the community. That's that one-on-one interaction that's on the streets. We talk about the appreciative inquiry, the community forum, and using the appreciative inquiry process. What people enjoy is having that one-on-one contact with the police officer that's transformed their life or just help feel something for them. So the community
Social media.
Social media, correct. Social media is also part of that engagement. And separate from the public records, the incidents, there was an accident or something happened. I see that as being oftentimes an information sharing that isn't necessarily two-way, because what's two-way about a lot of the incident reporting? There's a street closure and whatnot. We just need to get some of this information out in a timely manner. So community engagement, the transparency piece. Transparency is, we talked about those incidents. There's public information, and there are more delicate matters that information that we need to distribute. But there's also that public education. We've had 2 series of break-ins where someone from out of town came in and broke into all the cars that were unlocked. That's part of the public education, of getting that message out, things encouraging residents to take proactive steps to protect their property. The team building and organizational development. I think you've seen some of that reference in the commentary from officers and in the police report, that there are some tensions. There are things that are unaddressed. Part of it is within the organization. Part of it is an external input that's affecting the internal operations. There are folks that have taken a clear position on a particular officer, a particular incident, and that's affecting the operation because it creates an internal divide. And no organization divided can move forward, and those are the tensions that we need to address.
And can I just add on transparency, that we are also now seriously looking at the citizen review board concept for complaints. So I think that's another piece of that I think is really important.
Correct. And the final one is policies and procedures, where we're actively working on those and we're moving those forward.
Okay. I want to mention also that part of the strategy, I think both with Village Manager, Justice System Advisory Board, as well as what I'm going to talk about with the Active Transportation Enhancement Committee, is I use these words that in my work life we use a lot, the retail outreach approach and the wholesale approach. Wholesale is the way that we've done it in the past. We've just sort of said, here's a commission, sign up. But one of the things that we're going to be more actively doing is reaching out to people with expertise. And that's an important part of, I think, the success here, as with implementing the active transportation plan. And so I expect that will be a piece of what we do. We have a couple folks in town that have done this work around justice system, and a couple in particular that I think could be very helpful. And I think, when you specifically ask those folks, they're going to be interested, and I think they're going to really be able to help us move things forward. So, other questions or comments from council? Any comments from citizens? Okay, so what I think the next step is that at our next meeting, I'd like a one-pager kind of action plan, what are we going to do, and then move this forward, and be very specific about what those sort of short-term focuses are going to look like, which I think we've discussed. Okay? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the active transportation enhancement.
Well, can I-
Oh, yes.
We've talked about having a community meeting at some point. And maybe when you're writing your one thing, you could suggest when not the date, but at what point and approximate time would be good to do a community meeting, and what would be the purpose and what kind of interaction we'd want to have.
Okay. I would like to have that advisory board put in place so that whatever we bring to the community, it's coming from a group of people. That
Yeah.
it includes representation for the community. So I hope that we can get that group formalized between now and early November so that we could look to kick something, get started with a planning around a public forum late November or sometime in December.
Okay, great. All right. Active Transportation Enhancement Committee. This will be brief, I think. So well, that's different from the temporary transportation plan. All right, that I'm not suggesting will be brief. But I have a one-pager in the packet, and I've highlighted what we talked about at the last meeting around what the purpose of this group is. Some of you may remember the Bike Enhancement Committee that we had under the umbrella of Planning Commission. One of the things that I understand from the current project and some of the other things, the opportunities we have around grants, is that we want to make sure that there's a solid collaboration between Planning Commission, Council, and some experts around some of these areas. So what we have at this point, and we've sort of people know in general that this is forming, but also we've reached out to certain folks, is some people that are in town that have some important expertise. Eric Oberg, who has been the trail development person with Rails to Trails Conservancy for 13 years. Chris Bongiorno, who lives in town and is a transportation planner. We also have Paul Abendroth and Eric Clark have come forward. And then some of the folks that I wasn't sure about when this was due for the packet that have confirmed are Barbara Mann, who's the former transportation director from the senior center. She has been really active, and I really appreciated when she wrote the letter in the paper to say, let's get this plan off the shelf. I agree with her. We also have a confirmation from Laura Curlis and Gary Zaremski. And so we've got a pretty solid team. And then this is going to include a liaison from the Planning Commission. So there'll be that regular interaction. And then Denise Swinger, our Planning and Zoning Administrator, will sit ex officio. So my proposal is that this group starts to convene in November. Judy, I want you to help me figure out, coordinate with these folks what a good day and time monthly would be. And I think ultimately what we want to make sure this group does is help think thoughtfully about projects and make sure that there's a good communication plan, a good action plan, and that sort of thing. So, questions or comments about the Active Transportation Enhancement Committee?
Yes. Sort of trying to think of what to go first. I would like, ideally, I'd like to see everyone who's going to be on that committee to write some kind of statement about what their expertise is, what their skills are, why they want to be on it. What are they going to add to that committee? And I'd also like for us to have some kind of, I don't know if it would be a mission statement. what are the kind of issues that are coming into play regarding active transportation? For example, when we think of the senior center offers rides for people who otherwise wouldn't, who can't drive, don't have a car, need a ride. So, I mean, transportation, what are our needs, in other words? What are our needs? And some kind of statement about, like, what this committee might be doing.
Right.
Purpose statement.
Sure. And I mean, keep in mind that we've talked about this, it's a pretty focused, like, on the active transportation plan. But I agree there's some other areas as well.
Well, I mean, it's going to be part of planning commission, and transportation is, I think we need to look broadly at our transportation issues.
Yep, I agree. Okay. I like that. We can have that happen. Any other questions or comments from council? Okay. Questions or comments from citizens? All right, Matthew.
So, yeah, I guess I don't know if that's entirely, I feel like, maybe the right approach, just to be so expert-heavy and to have people who are primarily involved with the active transportation plan. And I say that after having read the active transportation plan, that I think that we suffered maybe in that process from a little too much expertise. I think from starting off, we didn't give enough appreciation to the fact that we are really villagey. We're a small village, and in general, active transportation is incredibly achievable. I mean, people are so comfortable, they walk in the streets. It's so easy to get around. People flock here from other communities because we have such a vibrant, walkable culture as it stands right now. And so I think that we definitely have areas for improvement, but in a lot of ways, that when I read through the plan, one thing I noticed is there's like not a simple solution to any problem. Like there's no place that's just like, let's put a crosswalk here. It's like, we need to put an elevated crosswalk with a speed bump. It's like somebody's trying to win like a AICP, planning award or something for all these projects. I mean, I think the one that really stood out to me is the informal crosswalk between Tom's and the Emporium that everybody uses, but that's in years 6 to 10 of the active transportation plan, because for whatever reason, just putting some paint in the road was like, no way, we can't just do that. That would be way too much. So I guess, I get wanting to have all this expertise, but there's a lot of low-hanging fruit for us. I mean, I think this project that we're about to talk about, like the fact that we took something as simple as, hey, we need to improve the drop-off situation for Mills Lawn, which I think universally everybody agrees is terrible, given there is no drop-off scenario other than the middle of the street. Anytime you're dropping people off in the middle of the street and they're just running across the street, that's a dangerous situation. That doesn't have anything to do with the roads being one-way or right turn only at the stop sign or anything like that. We took something that honestly should have been a layup. There should have been no need for a temporary plan or anything like that. It should have been, let's create a school drop-off zone. High five, we did it. Nobody would say anything. Kevin, we just had a great transportation project go down at the corner where you live. We added a stop sign, 2 stop signs. That's great. People now, when they come in from the south side of town on Spillane, are going to have to stop right there. And that will kind of introduce them into the neighborhood. And that's a great, low-cost, easy barrier. But that didn't come out of the active transportation plan. I don't know who came up with that idea, but bravo to them. Nice, simple solution. So I think that may be something that we're missing with this approach that we're taking right now, is that we're just not shooting layups. We're going for like 360 dunk, slam dunk competition. And it's like, let's just put it in the basket, So, all right, thanks.
Thanks, Matthew. Any other comments about the committee? Okay, all right, so let's talk about the temporary transportation plan. Josue, are you doing that, or Johnny, or?
Yes, that's a combination of all of us.
Okay.
All right. Up on the screens and in your packet, you see the diagrams that council requested that we provide and do a walkthrough of what this proposal is. So nothing has changed from the last proposal. That drawing up there highlights the traffic pattern change. Can you scroll down a little bit, Judy? Thank you. So what's up on the screen is South Walnut Street. You see Short Street from Xenia to Walnut. You see Xenia Avenue from Limestone down to Short Street. So the traffic pattern change is going to take place on South Walnut Street from Short Street to Limestone. The markings that you see up on the diagram, I know that this is such a small print, but this diagram also indicates what signs will be put up there. These signs include stop signs, wrong turn signs, right turn only signs, one-way signs, and whatnot. So this is the first one. Let's move on to the next picture, Judy. The next picture zooms in on particular activity. So on this one, we're highlighting the parking design along South Walnut Street. This is the parking area that would allow us to add additional 13 spots while also creating a designated drop-off area for the schools. The first set of parking spots on the south side of South Walnut Street, you see that it's closest to the church, and that's so we can create a passing lane and a dedicated drop-off lane in front of the school. There will be no parking on that side. That site where right now there's parallel parking will be exclusively a drop-off lane in front of the school. This will be the designated drop-off zone. Parents wishing to park their cars and walk their kids into the school can continue to do so at the designated pull-in diagonal parking spaces that are indicated in this drawing. Any questions on this flow? No, that's the right one. Yeah. All right, scroll down.
Sorry, just a second, keep talking.
Okay.
Technical difficulties.
While we're looking for whatever we're looking for, has the school had much input into any of this?
Yes, so this diagram here, the one that we're just showing you with the alternating diagonal parking, this was at the school's request. We had initially designed the parking to be all pull-in parking in front of the school, on that side where current parking exists. Matt Hausch requested that there's a dedicated no parking area with a dedicated drop-off lane and enforcement. The challenge now is the enforcement. There's staff that park in these spaces, and that limits the ability of vehicles to just pull off and drop off their kids. In addition, there are parents that just sort of pull in whichever way they find a spot to pull in and get out of the car, pack their kids' lunch, kiss them goodbye, and walk them all the way inside of the school and leaving the car unattended. So there's some challenges there with that arrangement. So here we'll have a little more enforcement, and we'll create parking across the street. So those parents that do want to park, they'll have the opportunity to park and walk in. So they influenced that decision-making and the design of that arrangement, parking and the travel lane and the dedicated drop-off section.
Right. So, and those comments were with regard to the temporary plan as it stands, as opposed to, and I'm asking a question as opposed to making a statement, as opposed to what would be the ultimate best solution for drop-off. So,
I did not engage them in that conversation in terms of what will be the permanent solution and what's in the active transportation plan. I have not had that conversation with them. Conversations that we've had were specifically around this temporary intervention strategy.
Understood, thank you.
Okay, so what's up on the screen here, this is the design for the Short Street parking. This illustration is of Short Street from Xenia Avenue to South Walnut Street. This indicates the travel lane to be that south left lane that will travel from Xenia Avenue to South Walnut with parking on the right-hand side. This also illustrates that handicap parking space that we discussed and the bicycle parking on one side of the street. We've considered eliminating that one spot on the end on the closest to the South Walnut Street to create additional bicycle parking. Any questions on this diagram?
I'm curious about the access to the hardware store from this diagram?
In conversations with the owners of the hardware store, they were concerned about two things. One is their delivery trucks and parking that's in their vicinity. The current count is 12 parking slots. This actually increases the parking spot by 2 additional spots. So that's one issue that we look to address. This does not eliminate parking spaces that's available in that space. The second issue, or their first issue, was how would delivery trucks get in to deliver their supplies. Delivery truck will get in this concept the same way they get in now. They have to make a wide turn to turn left onto Short Street, and they typically block off the entire street to deliver their supplies. So under this scenario, they will continue to make that wide left turn, park on the street, and they'll block off the street temporarily to get their supplies off the truck and deliver them to the hardware store.
At the risk of being annoying, sorry. I'm just wondering if there was any consideration of having the diagonal parking across the street in front of the bank, leaving the open area by the hardware store?
There's cutouts on that side of the street, so this is a better option to get more.
Oh, because there's those little driveway.
They have a
That's
little
right.
parking
It's all
area,
coming back
yes,
to me.
yes.
Thank you.
Okay, any?
Okay.
oh,
All right, there's more illustrations here. Judy, can you move on to the next one? This is a mock-up of what you'll see at the intersection of Short Street and South Walnut. We'll put up these wrong way signs to indicate that is one way from Xenia to South Walnut. Next illustration, Judy, please. This mock-up is of the intersection of Short Street and Xenia Avenue. You'll see a one-way sign right there at the end of Short Street to indicate that traffic's one-way moving from Xenia Avenue to South Walnut. Next diagram, please, Judy. This is the intersection of Elm Street and South Walnut. This would indicate that there's a one-way ahead. So folks will know that at the next intersection, that becomes a one-way. Next illustration, Judy. This is the intersection of Limestone and South Walnut facing Limestone. Here the signs would indicate there's a stop sign, a right turn only sign, and a no left turn sign. Up above that no left turn sign, those are the signs that are going to be visible from the other side of this intersection. That's the wrong way sign. So Judy, could you move on to the next slide? And that's that wrong way sign that will be visible from the Limestone Street looking onto South Walnut Street. Okay. Okay, that's it. Any questions on these diagrams?
As I recall, originally there was a tightening up or some bump outs were there of the curb as part of this plan?
If it becomes permanent.
So that people wouldn't have to walk across such a wide area. So my question is are there going to be temporary barricades to do that bump out thing?
We will have street markings and some barriers to indicate where the significant changes are. So if you were to looking at this view here, there will be diagonal parking, pull-in parking on the left-hand side. There will be temporary markings on the road to indicate that. And I think that we can look at putting in a barrier at the end where that diagonal parking ends to visually show where the parking would end. To address the crosswalk on the after transportation plan, that bump out exists to accommodate that shared lane on that sidewalk, so that narrows that area. We could put up additional barriers to visually represent that. There would be no other use other than to shorten that crosswalk.
Regardless of what happens in the end with this, what I particularly appreciated about this intersection and others was where they did bump outs, where they decreased the walking distance across, makes it more obvious to cars, slow down here. that sort of thing.
So what I have seen with temporary projects is sometimes bump outs are represented by paint. They often use a
Or
green paint.
temporary ballards, well, not ballards,
Bollards.
but whatever.
Yeah, or you could use cones or something.
Cones.
All right, well, let's take a look at that, yeah.
We can put concrete barricades there.
Okay.
We can show you.
They'd have to be really well identified.
Right. We can put cones on top of them.
Where the
There was a
concrete
reaction to
barriers
the
will be well
concrete.
identified.
So many reactions.
Okay, Kevin?
Yeah, so, I'm going to go along with the temporary nature of things. I will withhold any final judgment until after we've assessed. But on that point, trying to get straight in my mind what problem we're trying to solve, I guess I'm wondering, where are we with a baseline? Like, where are we now, and how will we determine how successful this experiment is? What's our baseline in terms of, the amount of time that whatever is happening? Does it get better? Does it get worse? So how do we know this is good or bad?
We've looked at other jurisdictions, what they've done to evaluate the effectiveness of some of these strategies. So they would include vehicle counters and survey tools, surveying commuters, parents of schools, different stakeholders that are affected by the traffic change, and observational studies, putting people out there on the streets, just observing traffic pattern before and after. So those are the activities we're looking to deploy in this process.
Thank you.
Okay, Lisa?
Well, I just think that the most important stakeholders to talk to once, because I'm in favor of the pilot. I think it's a good thing to try it, even though I know it's change and it's inconvenient for people to accommodate that, are the business owners that are affected, the school team, police. I think I feel like those are the most important stakeholders. And I've seen the argument that the school pickup and drop off is just a little set of time during the day, but they're important little community members, and I think it's worth taking a look at. But I am worried about the business impact for the hardware store. I think it's really great that we have a hardware store, and I hope that we can collaborate with the business owners in our main street.
Yes, and we're concerned. We've had 2 meetings where U.S. Bank and the hardware store have been invited to 2 meetings, and we've looked at their issues. For the hardware store, we think we're addressing the issues that they presented, was their parking and access by the delivery truck. The U.S. Bank has presented an issue that we don't know how we really can address, and that's their drive-through. Right now, as it is being used as a cut-through. And how much control we'll have that as it goes into private parking. We have an idea. We see that there's a bypass on the drive-through that's open if there's no car parked there. So if we could move a designated car to park there while, I think that's staff parking, then that would block off that travel lane.
To prevent that.
Right. So
Yeah,
then
or
folks
golf
will-
cart parking, of course.
Or, yes, or bicycle parking. They could designate that as bicycle parking.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
So many questions, so little time. So, would it be too confusing to just change the flow of traffic during the drop-off and pickup times?
Would it be too confusing?
In
I
other
think
words, like-
anything I think it requires effort with say a rush hour traffic modification. No, it's having the resources out there to direct that traffic during that period of time, and then resources put it back in place. Certainly, that's, with the plan specifically addresses converting that space into one-way, and not one-way during peak hours or specific hours.
So, like in court, I'll withdraw the question, because I guess that would be another approach. But since we're just talking about what's on the table now, fine, we'll let it be. But I think again, a separate, a completely different proposal would be to just do it during the pertinent hours in
Right.
terms of drop-off.
Right, right, and that could be for the one-way or the no left turn. The no left turn being that no left turn from South Walnut onto Limestone.
Okay. All right, good.
Yeah, and I think, related to that, I hope everyone's open. I hope that we get constructive and accurate feedback, from all those stakeholders that Lisa mentioned. But, there's already been great ideas, good discussions, plenty of them, and I wouldn't be surprised if we end up with, some modified version. I'm definitely going to remain open. So, and I hope everybody else does give us good feedback.
Right, right. We're certainly open to it. We're the ones taking a lot of heat for what we're executing, and we're doing it with an open mind that we're looking to solve problems, not create more problems. And we're going to get feedback via surveys. We hope that these surveys are also coming from a space of people being open and not entrenched in their ideas. I get that there's a lot of experts in the community, and we want all those best ideas. We welcome it. And, if we fail, we fail. Then we figure out the next thing.
Good, excellent.
The one thing I'd also add is that, I think we tend to hear from people who are against things, and people who are in favor of things tend to remain a little bit more quiet. And so I've been thinking a lot, trying to figure out how to get a balanced perspective. So if people are listening, and if you have a positive perception, please share that with us too, because what we hear is the negative.
And I want to remind one more thing, and then we'll see what other comments there are, I hope that we can get back to a space where, and, people have articulated this very nicely around, Judy, in fact, the car centricity that, is in our mind, so while I appreciate some of the letters, kind of going through all these configurations about the cars and the cars and the cars and the cars, we should not all be in cars. I understand some people aren't, able to bike or walk or be in a mobility device, but I hope we don't forget that piece in particular, and then that ties into safety. It ties into what Matthew was saying about, we're already walkable, we should maximize that. And there's, plenty of concerns around bike parking. I mean, and that's one of the pieces here too. So, so anyway, I think that some of that's been lost in the translation, but that is at the heart of what active transportation is about. So Laura, I saw you had a hand up. Was that?
Can I ask a quick question first?
Yeah.
When it comes to conversations with a school, did they say during the time when this is being tested that maybe they're going to be a little lenient on when kids are getting into the school building? Because I can imagine for the first couple of days, if we're trying something new, it might be difficult, especially if we're all going one way. Is that conversation?
We haven't.
Yeah.
We haven't talked about leniency. I imagine this is for tardiness, but we're on Monday the 14th. We have a scheduled walkthrough of what this will look like, and prior to that, we'll have a discussion with the school to bring that issue.
Okay.
Okay, Laura.
I don't know, there's so much to say. A lot of what I think people aren't hearing is the analysis of the downside of doing this. We have thought about how's it going to funnel traffic onto Phillips and High Street and Stafford? How's it going to, for me personally, I use this a lot, this area. And what I will personally do, because I live on the south side, instead of taking Walnut to the north side where I need to go, I will now be going through the center of town, creating more congestion. And so how many people from the south side will be making that choice rather than coming down? And I'm sure the people on High and Stafford and Phillips are thrilled, that we're going to be going either on their street or if we want to avoid congestion downtown. So I think what people aren't hearing is we've thought about the unintended consequences of this, and we have made this decision that this is obviously best. I guess the other thing is, when if the school has a problem, can the school solve it? Meaning, should the school think about building a drop-off area or going in the back somehow? I don't know. Maybe those have all been thought about and tossed. Why is this a village first issue, I guess, is the other thing that I'm hearing. So I'm sure others have comments. Thanks.
And you do know that we're just trying this out, though. We haven't made the decision, yeah?
Well, okay, but where's the analysis of the downside before you even go this direction? There is a downside, I'm sure. I mean, 99 comments have been posted to Facebook about it.
Right. Richard?
Richard Lapides, 130 West Limestone. I use all this area very intensely. I live on it. I see the activity every day and every evening. So I think I have a point of view worth noting. There are 2 points. Number one, the rear of the school's property is Elm, I think, right? Phillips. Okay. I myself use Walnut constantly to go to my studio. Instead, I will go to Phillips. It's very accessible, very easy, and you keep your car out of all this by going that way. And this plan services that very nicely. It need not be a federal case. The second thing I would point out is on this very slide, you're looking at a part of the school ground property that's almost never used by anybody. Okay? It's not used by the kids. It's not used by the teachers. It's kind of useless right there. As we look at the slide on the left, it's territory that the schools own that could, in my opinion, it seems very well placed to be exploited if somebody would care to do that. And that would be a school matter. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, Megan.
Well, I have a comment and a question. I guess what my concern is watching how this has kind of played out in people reacting to it, and then the reaction against the reaction, which I kind of witnessed a little bit after Laura spoke, is like a defensiveness. So the village has a proposal. And I guess my fear is that now you are going to have this investment in it. And if it turns out to not be a great idea or people don't like it, then you'll hold on to it because it's a win and not a loss. And I guess that's just my fear. And I know that you're saying that you're open to listening, but I'm not seeing that in a lot of the debate that's been going on. So I want to encourage that, yes, you're trying something, but try not to get that invested. I guess my question is really about that investment. I'm seeing signs, staff time, there's going to be police time. What is the budget for this, and where is this coming from? Thanks.
Megan, to your first question, if it fails, I'll be the first one to say it failed. And accept my piece in it, but I know that we're coming at this with the best of intentions and the best skills that we have at the table. So we're looking to get the best data that we can from it. On your second piece, on the budget, time-wise, that's time that we already have on our team. It's salary time. We're foregoing doing other activities to do this, but we think that this is important. This has been an issue for the schools and for the community. From one member, I've heard it, 10 years that they've been trying to resolve this, and they pushed and pushed and hasn't gotten done. And when they came on board to work on the schools, they had been working or looking to address this even before then. So there's an issue here that's gone on for well over 10 years. So I know that there's a need there. There's a demand to do something different, and that's what we're looking to do.
And then just, Matthew, real quick. Johnny, is it true that we have most of this equipment already?
And also the implement and the feedback part too, with the vehicle counting and all that.
Right.
We do have some of the signs and some of the tape and barricades, but we got $900 in extra signs that we had, and we've got 2 billboard signs that we got to rent for this temporary.
Okay.
Yep.
So 900,
We'll have about $4,200 in it, the way that I understand it.
okay. Okay, Matthew?
Yeah, so to the point that I think Laura and Megan brought up a little bit, is taking into account that with any project like this, the council and the village manager, you're extending political capital, right? You're having to spend political capital to say, we have what we think is a good idea. We feel so confident in it, we want to try it out, right? And so in the event this doesn't work out, what is your plan to come back from that? Because as we've seen with some other things, I know, for instance, with the last school levy, they're still struggling to figure out what's their strategy for how they're going to get it funded. So if you're unsuccessful in this, and there's already been a significant amount of community pushback, right, are you going to be hesitant to go forward with whatever the next iteration of the plan is? The whole time, we're not going to be addressing, again, the core issue, which is how do we improve Mills Lawn drop-off, right? Right now, we're only doing that for 3 weeks, which is a point. One thing which Megan and I has discussed real quickly, as parents of Mills Lawn students, we have not been formally notified that this is going to be happening. And it's Monday, and this takes place 1 week from now. And this is going to be a big change for a lot of parents and how they're getting their kids to school, so it would probably behoove us to get some kind of coordinated communication strategy to let people know that this is even going to be happening, and the timeline for that. Yeah, I guess that's what I got. Thanks.
Matthew, this is 2 weeks from now, so we're looking to start working on this on the weekend of the 19th. This is the weekend after street fair, for it to take place.
Okay, all right.
To take place on the 21st and go through the 9th, November. In terms of your point about social capital, I think, yeah, to that, your reasoning around that, investing or spending so much social capital, and what do you do if you lose? The argument can be made on the other side. If we're always operating out of fear of losing our social capital for what is right, then we may not embark on things that are unpopular, or that there's few people that are looking to argue against something.
I'd like to respond to Matthew and to Megan. First, Matthew, I appreciated your suggestion that there might be overkill involved, and that, hey, let's just walk down Livermore Street like we do, and that's fine. And I agree with a lot of that. I have zero investment in this particular plan. Zero. I do have investment in safety, whether it's kids getting out of car, and as far as I'm concerned, it's not just about drop-off, because I drive up South Walnut, turn left onto Xenia, always wondering, is there someone coming south on Xenia that's going to be hitting me while I'm turning? So I think it's a very complicated and potentially dangerous intersection. And I almost hit a kid on a bike but that was because he wasn't looking either way when he was crossing the sidewalk on his bike. But, so, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I mean, I think our investment is trying out something and see what works, what doesn't work. That, I don't think anyone has a particular investment in this particular plan.
Yeah,
I'd like to finish. What is surprising to me is how much resistance there is to try it out for 3 weeks. I mean, come on. You have to drive an extra block? You have to ride your bike an extra block? Really? I mean, let's be a little, seems like there's such rigidity and conservatism.
And you get 16 extra parking spots.
Mm,
All right,
I'd like to comment first.
Yeah, okay.
Also, I'm committed to trying out changes. And that's kind of my style. So I react favorably to let's try it out. But I also don't have I don't I don't know how it's going to turn out. So if I sounded defensive, it's not defensive of the idea. It's just the defensiveness to the suggestion that I've already made up my mind, because I certainly haven't. And I think it's really thought-provoking, this idea of loss of capital, because part of sitting here for me is taking those risks. And I think tonight you've heard all these different initiatives that I'm involved with. And if I was spending my time worrying, every single one, and not just trying to go forward to try to get stuff done, I would be paralyzed. So I understand that on any issue, there's going to be people in favor and people who are opposed, and all I can do is listen and try to stay engaged and make a decision. So I mean, I can't think about that. I can't think about that question, that if I say, yeah, let's give this a try, and as a result, what, people won't vote for me, I can't think that way. I would just, my head would explode.
So Matthew, before we get up, I'm going to let Dino speak, since you've been up at the mic quite a bit.
Dean Pilata.
Where did Dino go?
All right, quickly, there's a lot, look, this is a 3-week program. We've met with everybody, the businesses have met with people, we've talked to them about this. You may not be privy to that.
talking to them.
Well, I'm talking to you too, I'm letting you know too, that we've went through this in dire straits with everybody. We know what the outcome, we know the good, the bad, the different of this. Do we all agree with it? No. Do we understand it? Yes. It's a 3-week program. That's the bottom line. Look, there's going to be stuff that's going to be coming down Phillips Street. People are going to be coming down Davis, where I live, or they're going to be coming down Whiteman. We understand that we're going to start pushing traffic towards us. It's a 3-week program. We're going to see what the outcome's going to be. I don't think that's the pushback that's coming. The businesses have looked at it. We get it. We'll see what happens with it. I mean, we have to be open-minded to it. There's going to be a hybrid. I mean, my feeling is we all feel that there's going to be a hybrid out of this. So that's what the test is for. So let the test work. Let it work. Let's see what happens, and we'll go from there. You guys are open-minded to it. It isn't your way or the highway. We're open, no pun intended, but that was pretty good. But it's open. So let's just see what happens for the 3-week period, and we'll go from there. And hopefully we get a hybrid out of it and we move on.
Yeah. I'll just say, it did remind me that I thought it was interesting that the community health assessment highlighted pull-in parking, which is something that, I think is intriguing about this plan. All right, Matthew?
Yeah, I guess, I'm all for trying things, but I think part of what we should recognize is we're not taking an incremental approach to trying here. So how are you going to know what's working? Because you're throwing so many things at it. You're throwing one-way street, 2 different one-way streets, making something where currently you can make a left to a right turn only. If you go stand at that corner there at Walnut and Limestone, 80% of the traffic is making a left onto Limestone down to 68. They're not heading back into the neighborhoods. That's just how it is. Same way. People that are turning onto Limestone left, usually coming from 68, are going right onto Walnut. That is a very popular traffic pattern. You're changing that. You're also trying to introduce a school drop-off lane at the same time. And so I don't see how you can possibly evaluate all of those things happening simultaneously to see what's working and what's not working, versus if you're taking an incremental approach to implementing something like this, then you can actually see what are the things that are happening and not happening. That's right, this is only a 3-week project. It's going to be over like that. And it's not even during a particularly busy time of the year, probably intentionally. So I think to say, yeah, we're going to have the solution to this after 3 weeks is a little bit naive on our parts.
Okay, thanks, Matthew. Faith?
Oh, sort of glad I stuck around. So I was, before being here and looking at the diagrams, I was feeling kind of, oh God, why do we have to do this? I kind of like it. I looked at it and where the parking and the drop-off zone, and it just makes sense to me. So I just thought I'd stand up and say so, and, and I'm one of the people that, as Matthew says, I drive down and turn left on Limestone and then right on 68, because I'm going to my office, which is a block or 2 away. But there are other ways to go, and I can deal with that. I think, do I understand that you can come up Short Street and turn right? And that, I think, was one of my main issues, is like, oh, God, it's going to be one way all the way down from Dayton, Yellow Springs, and it's not. And I think that makes a lot of sense, what you've done.
Thanks, Faith. Any other comments? I'll just make one closing one. So, I know that a few people felt that, some of my Facebook posts were a little bit, I don't know.
Snarly?
I guess. And I want to point out that, similar to what Lisa said, I don't think this community as a whole wants elected officials that just nod politely, listen to you, and then either don't do anything or do what they want. And that's part of why I felt it was important to create some space for other feedback. The most important thing to me, though, is that we deal in facts. And so if I got a little bit riled up, it's because there seems to be this allowing the perpetual misinformation. I'm losing parking, you're closing down Short Street, all these things that are absolutely not true. And if you look at my comments on Facebook completely, without pulling out a couple words here and there, you will see that that's exactly what I addressed. And so the idea that the village is not listening when we added parking spots, when we made sure that truck deliveries could happen, is where I get a little bit irritated. And so, I'm also a human being. And so yes, see, it comes out every once in a while. And so, I apologize to everybody that felt upset, but the reality is, like I said on Facebook, I will continue to fight the good fight, which means I will do the best I can for our community. It does not mean I'm trying to have a battle. And I love that we have an active transportation plan, because we're already getting tons of money for sidewalks. If not everybody knows this, we're gonna have a sidewalk on Limestone in 2 years. I mean, that's some cool stuff, so.
Can you do that sidewalk right there?
Yeah, that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna pick up off it. Is that what you mean?
The little tiny one that there's no sidewalk between there and the funeral home, see how it just ends?
Yeah, yeah, that's all stuff that's recommended. I mean, it's honestly, most of the plan is about simple stuff, right? What was elevated was some of the stuff that's unique that we might want to try, but most of it really is about sidewalks. Okay, so great discussion. Thank you, team. Thank you, community. And I want to shift to new business, and Richard, give you a chance to talk about a dog park. Thanks for hanging in there.
Make it quick. It's been kicked around forever. We all know that. I figure between 1/3 and 1/2 of the citizens of the town have dogs, okay? In this community, it's illegal to allow your dog to run free except on your own property. That means, for most of us who don't have much property and want to keep our dogs healthy, that there's really no option but to go to Xenia, or to go to, I guess, Springfield, or to go to there are a few other choices out in the country. So I suggest in my letter that the village already owns property which is fallow. The mandate, whatever the mandates are, to protect the water towers does not require even a quarter of the acreage that's now surrounds the towers. Handily, all that land is accessible from Gaunt Park, and there is water available already. So it seems to me that it's straightforward to convert some of that land into a dog park and satisfy that third or half of the population that would like to run their dogs without breaking the law. Each day I go to Gaunt Park right now, and I break the law every time I unleash my hound. And I'm sure I'll be criticized for that, but that's got to be.
Police chief is right behind you.
I talked to a couple officers about it, because they they check out that area, and we talk about it a little bit, and I think they have probably more important things on their minds. So I don't put it in their, I try to avoid doing it in their faces, to tell you the truth. I don't want them to have to make a decision. I do think that if the village is interested in using that land productively for that percent of the community that have dogs, it wouldn't be too hard to do. I also think that a lot of the people in the community who have dogs would be willing to share in the financial responsibility involved in solving their problem, especially because they're all kind of put out by this. This is another 10-year thing. There's been no initiative for a problem that's obvious. So I scouted and filmed all that area very carefully. And as you face the towers, I don't have quite the bird's eye view, but as you face the towers going into the park, to the left is a very large area. There's even a gate there and a semi-road there. To the right of the towers, there's a big downhill section that's, I guess there must be 2.5 acres of land in there. It's pretty reasonably accessible too. So there's plenty of land. And that's why I wrote the letter. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Richard.
You're welcome.
Johnny, can you say a few words about this? I know we've talked about it, and just if this is a possibility, and then maybe we'll.
I think it's a great possibility. I would like to get with Richard and go out there and show him where we need to keep it. But I think we could probably do an inside fence to protect our sources. This is a water source for the village, so we have to do what we got to do to protect it. We have been cleaning up the fence line. We've been cleaning up around the towers because people cutting the fence and getting in there, and we found sofas and everything in the brush and all that.
Oh,
So
my goodness.
if you guys have noticed, we've been cleaning up around, mowing down the honeysuckle and all that around the towers. So I do think it's a possibility, and I'll get with Richard and we'll go out there and explore it, and then we can bring something back.
Okay, I appreciate it, and appreciate that open-mindedness. I don't know that we need to discuss it a lot. I think this is something that'll come back once we've got an idea. But as I said at the beginning of the meeting, I would like to not be known as a dog-unfriendly community. So if this is one step towards that, and I agree, the dog park's been something that since Karen's son was in high school, he had a proposal for this, and it's just always gone kind of pushed back. I'm excited. Thanks. Okay, the other issue is the bylaws.
Yeah. So we already talked about the Yellow Springs Community Development Corporation a little bit earlier. So we have in front of us the set of proposed bylaws or code of regulations. So the CDC has its own legal counsel separate from the attorney that, at the council of counsel, and that is, to remain with a lot of neutrality. So we were able to work with that attorney, and also who is an expert in the formation of CDCs, as well as a second person, a partner who focuses on governance for these kinds of entities, which was extremely helpful, and I certainly learned a lot of lessons learned from other organizations that have formed these, particularly around the term limits and how to time those so that you didn't lose all of your expertise through the cycles of people coming on and rolling off. That was an area of concern. And so as we mentioned earlier, the entity has to be 40% elected officials. One thing I want to point out is that the only elected officials that count toward that 40% are the council members and the school board member, and the township. The school board members, although they are elected, don't count towards that 40% because school boards are not economic development. That's not the business they're in. And so we learned that, and so they don't count. So, they count, but they don't count toward that 40%. So you'll see when you look at it, there's 2 directors from the council, 2 directors from the township, 2 directors from the school district, and then 3 additional directors that are from the local community, 1 appointed by the Antioch College Board of Trustees, one appointed by the Yellow Springs Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, and one appointed by the Yellow Springs Community Foundation Board of Trustees. So you'll see that it's a really interesting group of people with a lot of insights into the community. And then there's also one at-large director from a business or nonprofit organization within the Yellow Springs, Miami Township boundaries. So I don't think I want to go through here in any detail. I think the membership is the most important thing. It is a standalone 501c3. It will have its own set of officers. It will need staff support at some point. I really want to express tremendous gratitude to Lisa Abel and Gina Marie Cox from the Yellow Springs Community Foundation, who have been a neutral convener as we've been creating this. So it really represents collaborative work. For all of those entities that I named have put their fingerprint on this, and so I respectfully bring it to you for review and hopefully approval at the next meeting.
Excellent. Okay, yeah, I think that's a great summary. And, again, besides coordinated decision-making, community development corporations deal with land, so residential development, economic development, community development, and, I think importantly, again, is the designated piece, all right? So for folks that maybe with a past organization we had felt a little concerned, these are publicly announced, open meetings, transparency is critical. Okay, manager's report.
Thank you.
Real quick question.
Yeah, Matt, come on up. What's that?
Who funds the CDC?
So right now, Lisa, you can answer
Right,
that.
so ultimately, the CDCs are funded in different ways, right? Oh,
I'm asking whose funds ours.
okay. Well, right now, we're just in the early building stage. The village does have some economic development fund that was set aside, that was grant money, that you've heard us talk about, maybe that revolving loan fund. So that's some initial monies. Then there's also, we started to look into grants. The other way that this can become funded is if assets are put into the CDC by one of the participants that then are sold for a profit. So we're going to be working very hard to find ways to fund it, various mechanisms.
And then also besides that economic development fund, the other 5 stakeholders are putting in some
Yeah,
initial startup funds.
everybody put in a little money.
Yeah, even though the village had that fund, it was decided that everybody should have skin in the game.
But right now, financially, it's very small.
Other than the school board, I presume.
Oh, the school board did put in money.
Yep.
I mean, everybody did, because
Little
even
bit.
if they're not part of the percentage that is elected officials, they're still stakeholders. So, the college, the chamber.
I just figured because you said they weren't an economic development entity, that they wouldn't be able to use their funds for economic development purposes.
But yeah, with the sort of the coordinated decision-making piece is where they bought in. And then some of the, things that they may be thinking about with residential development. And so, yeah, so the Community Foundation put in a little bit, Chamber, so everybody put in some. Okay, yeah,
All right.
manager's report.
Thank you, Brian. Quick updates on a few of our activities, primarily one that's been very visible on Xenia Avenue. You might, a couple weeks ago, we brought a request to finance the repairs of a collapsed storm drain that took place at Nippers Corner. We're happy to report that we have completed that work. It was not without its challenges, and that being that we discovered 2 underground tanks that were undisclosed and unknown to the owners. Those have been removed. Soil samples have been taken of the soil surrounding the tanks and the storm line, so we're waiting on results from those tests. So based on the outcome of those tests, we'll proceed with next steps as to what happens underneath that. But for right now, the lot has been repaired and they're ready for business. Any questions on the drains? All right, the next is a quick update on our budget preparations. We held 2 work sessions totaling 7 hours in preparation for 2020 budget submittal that would come before council on November 4th for a second reading on November 18th. The work sessions were by topic. On Saturday, the 27th, we discussed the general fund, and on the 28th, enterprise and special revenue and capital funds. We've taken the feedback from council to find additional savings and some alignments, and we'll work on our task list and come back to council with an updated proposal. Finally, there's important meetings coming up that we've been coordinating with a subcommittee of the Environmental Commission, and that's a public meetings that we'll have as it relates to Vernay's Laboratory 140-page final remediation plan. These meetings will take place all on October 24th. There are 3 meetings. EPA will have a meeting with the plaintiffs and the attorney and the company. A second meeting with the Yellow Springs government. That's many of us here. That's many of our administrative staff and our team directing operations on the ground, and representatives for the Environmental Commission. That'll take place between 2:30 and 4:30, and we'll close out the date with an EPA public information session that's designed for the general public. This will be an opportunity for the general public to understand the contamination issues that have taken place at the Vernay property, the remediation plan as proposed by Vernay Laboratories, and commentary and feedback from EPA. And then what's next steps with that property. And next steps is that there be an open comment session at the beginning of 2020 for all parties to provide feedback and comments on the final remediation plan. The village intends to provide our own set of comments as it relates to the remediation plans, with the focus on ensuring the public safety and well-being of both the surrounding community of near the Vernay properties and the overall Yellow Springs community. So that's it for a manager's report.
All right, thanks, Josue. Judy?
Just a reminder to folks that if you want to know what happened at a meeting, who supported what the actual plan of anything is, I'm your person, because it's all public information, so there's no need to guess. No need even to go to Facebook. I will let you know what happened. So that's my job. I like doing it. So feel free, please, to reach out if you have questions about anything. And then Sean Devine is extremely ecstatic. He may not appear to be so, but he is, because Channel 5 is back up, and it's streaming government meetings through the entire month of October, which I know most of you are probably ready to get right home and get on that. So that's what's happening.
There's a lot of exciting stuff. Okay, future agenda items.
You talked about having Renergy as a topic.
Yes, I think we should debrief on that.
Okay, because I also think it would be good to have them make a presentation.
I'll have them come. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe for the next meeting? Okay, well, one of the next couple meetings anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I've got it, yep.
All right.
And we'll have the resolution for the
Bylaws.
CDC bylaws, even
Yep.
though I won't be here.
See, we're gonna bring the dog park back. We'll see if we're ready for the next meeting. I'd like to see that happen sooner rather than later.
Bring your dog to a council meeting.
I was going to bring my chief lobbyist, but she was asleep.
Well, we should think about whether the John Bryan Community Center becomes a dog-friendly building. Seriously. Anything else?
You had mentioned having the action plan for the Justice System Commission or whatever iteration, but I wasn't clear as to who was to bring that.
Josue.
Okay.
That'll be for me, and that'll probably be November 4th, November 18th timeline.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else?
Bless you.
Excuse me.
Okay, well, with that, I would happily entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn this meeting.
All right.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank everyone.
Thank you.
You survived.
So not bad.
They always are.
Are you around tomorrow?
Otherwise, I'll. Did you say no? I think so.
Because I'm coming for that meeting.